Okay, I'd like to call to order the March 6, 2017 meeting of the Highland Park Board of Education. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the Highland Park Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting setting forth the time, date, and location to be submitted for publication to the Home News Tribune and Star Ledger and posted on the board's website at least 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Members of the public who wish to address the board will be given the opportunity to do so before the board adjourns for the evening. Linda, can we please have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Here.
Ms. Cimarosti?
Here.
Ms. Gowan?
Here.
Mr. Krieger?
Here.
Mr. Magaziner?
Here.
Ms. McFadden DiNicola? Ms. Pietrobono?
Here.
Ms. Richardson?
Here.
Mr. Roslowitz?
Here.
Be it resolved, pursuant to the Sunshine Act, NJSA 10-4-12 and 13, the Highland Park Board of Education will now meet in closed session to discuss student discipline and litigation regarding special education placement. These exemptions are permitted to be discussed in closed session in accordance with NJSA 10-4-13. Information regarding the board's closed session discussion will be disclosed to the public as soon as the need for confidentiality no longer exists. Can I get a motion to recess into closed session?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
To reconvene to regular public session?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, which is hiding behind the screen back there, so we'll visualize it through the screen? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Linda, do we have any additional communications? There's nothing on the agenda?
Nothing on the agenda. There were a few inquiries which were responded to, but I wanted to request that the board members file their ethics and financial disclosure forms online if they haven't done so. And I know there were, I think, 2 board members that had their forms returned for corrections, so please look into that. If you have any questions, need assistance, feel free to give me a call or email me. Thank you.
Did we get a separate email with those?
You would have received an email with a link
and it comes,
to it.
Who does it come from? Because actually, I remember getting the email from Janet saying we should be getting it, but then I don't remember seeing the email.
Hold on, I can tell you.
I'm looking it up.
Comes from,
Yeah, Janet Becker.
it's called School Ethics. School Ethics at doe.state.nj.us.
Okay, that's where it comes from?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where it comes
So
from.
if you haven't done it, like me, just make sure to go home and search for that in your inbox. All right, thank you for that reminder, Linda. And then next on the agenda, we have the meeting from the regular and public executives and executive sessions from February 27th, 2017. Doesn't look like there's any changes to those. So did anybody take a look at them or have any questions before? And for anybody here, we don't vote on anything tonight. Tonight is just our workshop meeting, so tonight is just for discussion purposes only. All right. Oh, yay. And look, your timing is amazing. So I'm just going to kind of stretch out what I'm saying for another 30 seconds. Now it's my turn to stall. Okay, so next week we will vote on those minutes from the regular public and executive sessions from our last meeting and student report.
Okay, so at Irving, Read Across America Week was last week, and they hosted a pajama day where students could cuddle up with a nice book. And they also had a high school mystery reader day where high school students, I think, went and read to the Irving students. Bartle also celebrated Read Across America Week, and they had a parade, and they'll have an author book talk and assembly this Wednesday. Spring sports practices have commenced at both the high school and the middle schools, and the Battle of the Books competition hosted by the high school will be on Thursday. Something that's been brought up by a lot of high school students to me that they're particularly concerned about is the date for prom. This falls on a Jewish holiday and means that many students would have to miss part of prom, and there's an issue I don't really understand about how you have to wear specific makeup that is something for that, and it would cause a huge disruption for them because they'd miss pre-prom and they'd only be able to go out around 9:30. So what they're asking for is to have this looked at or have the date be moved. And they just wanted me to bring that up.
I'll let you take that one.
So
I'm very acquainted with this issue, and what we have been able to do is extend the prom to 12:30, an additional half hour, and we will provide transportation for the students who have to arrive late. So those students who are honoring the holiday will have 3 hours to attend the prom. Unfortunately, we could not change the date. The only two potential dates the venue had available were June 8 and June 15. June 8 is the senior trip, which we couldn't change, and June 15 is smack dab in the middle of final exams. So that was a problem as well. I have spoken with one of the two impacted families, and we'll be speaking with the second family tomorrow morning, personally, about the issue.
Okay.
Okay, is that everything, Lillian? Lillian, that's everything?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, so we'll move on to Dr. Taylor's report.
I do have several items on the report. One thing that I did not include, which I will share with the board and those families and guardians who probably showed up to at least get an update on this matter, and that is the change in the way we're going to be grading honors and AP courses. The teachers at the high school, Mr. Lassiter and I have decided that we are going to grandfather the sophomores into the new protocol. So that does come on the heels of the teachers listening to your input and understanding where you're coming from. So the letter will be going out from Mr. Lassiter probably tomorrow by paperless, and then he'll post something on the Facebook page.
But wasn't there also somewhat of a clarification to that? It's not grandfathering it for all of the sophomores, it's grandfathering it for the sophomores
obviously
who are
the
currently
sophomores
taking...
who were impacted
well,
by
I think the clarification...
by the change. So,
right. So if a sophomore is not taking an honors class this year, they wouldn't get the +5 next year,
I believe so.
right?
In other words,
So if-
the impact that we understood to be detrimental was on the students who would see a drop in their grades, a potential drop in their grades from one class to another. But I do have to clarify with Mr. Lassiter on that. But it does make sense to me that that's how we proceed. So again, we are going to be grandfathering the students. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic to Ms. Bodine, our Director of Educational Services, who I've invited back to talk about the program that we'd like to establish going forward next year. You're all set.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for, again, having me back to discuss some of our special education programming. This is something that when I did my state of special ed, I was not prepared at that time to discuss this. I hadn't fully worked through all of the components, so we agreed that I would, once I had all of the pieces in place, I would come back and discuss this with you, which is why I'm coming back to you in such a short period of time. So what I would like to talk about is our elementary therapeutic supports that we would like to put in place for the upcoming school year. It's not going to work. Sorry. Nope, it's not going to happen. You can do it from there. I don't know, maybe it's me. Thank you. So first I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk a little bit about some research regarding students with mental health and behavioral issues. This is a study that was done last year by the Child Mind Institute for Children's Mental Health. And in that report, the research shows that mental health disorders are the most common health issue facing our nation's school-age children at this time. 1 out of every 5 children in the United States meets the criteria for a major mental health disorder. 50% of mental health disorders begin before the age of 14. Thank you. Being at risk for mental health problems in the first grade leads to a 5% drop in academic performance in just 2 years, which is very important to note because obviously we want to make sure that we intervene on behalf of our students so that we don't see this kind of academic drop. Intervening early in school helps prevent behavioral issues from developing into problems that lead to suspensions, expulsions, and dropout. There's an urgent need to identify the signs of these conditions early in life if children are to get the care and the support that they need to thrive. And I'd also like to point out that this is not a Highland Park issue. This is a nationwide issue. This is something that's being faced across our country for most, if not all, of our schools. I know that in conversation with many of my fellow directors from the county and also outside of the county, we're all facing a rise in students, especially elementary school students, that are in need of some therapeutic supports. So I'd like to just point out some of our elementary needs right now. Both Irving and Bartle schools have students right now that are in need of therapeutic supports in order to help them best achieve their educational, social, and emotional benefits while in school. So some of these students might actually be at risk for out-of-district placement if we're not able to build in the supports necessary to help them be successful in their home school. So providing these students with therapeutic, behavioral, and educational services all at the same time is really the optimal framework to help them be successful. And then, of course, overlaying that with family support. So things like access to perform care, private therapists, mobile crisis, etc. You know, picking up that home piece and helping to support parents really kind of completes that full circle to help support these students and give them all of the supports that they need. Right now, both our middle and our high school have access to the teen center to help build in some of these supports, but Irving and Bartle really doesn't have anything like that right now to help these students at these grade levels. So for the upcoming school year, what I would like to propose is that we hire a mental health specialist, most likely a licensed clinical social worker, but that we hire someone on staff that would be in charge of case managing and servicing approximately 10 students between Irving and Bartle that could really use some of these supports. The mental health specialist would coordinate with the child study team members, the on-staff behavior specialist, the educational professionals, and anyone else working with the student to help create programming that provides the necessary supports. We really want to look for a fluid program that's tailor-made to our students' very individualized needs that helps to give them what they need while giving them the opportunity to remain in as much integrated courses as possible so that they can stay with their non-disabled peers. And then we also want to overlay that with the support for the families by facilitating access to those community resources and supports that I mentioned. So this is what it would look like. We would hire the mental health specialist, and that person would provide the supports and services like development of an integrated therapeutic program for each individual student, individual, group, and family therapy, as well as home visits. This may potentially mean that this individual would have flex hours, meaning that if we had a family that needed to meet after school hours, or we needed to do a home visit in the evening, we could flex that individual's hours so that they were able to accomplish that. They could also engage in social skills training, be it individual, group, or integrated. They could provide information and facilitation to help parents access those community resources. They would do the CST case management for these identified students. Again, it's about 10 students. And then they would consult with all of the people that work with this student, the child study team, the behavior specialists, and the educational professionals, as well as the administration, to help not only support those students, but also to support everyone around those students. We want our students to be as successful as possible, so it's not just about providing the supports to our students in need, but also supports to their peers, their teachers, the administration, so that everyone can be successful in the integrated setting. So that's what I would like to propose for next year, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward with that and give these students the supports that they need.
Any questions?
Questions?
Any questions?
On right now, what you're looking at in terms of the load is there's about 10 students currently. Is that roughly consistent over time that there's in that neighborhood a number of students?
Well, that could fluctuate. It could fluctuate up and down. Right now, that's the projection that we're looking at for the upcoming year. That doesn't mean that's the only students that would necessarily be involved with that individual, but for case management purposes and intensive services, right now we're looking at about 8 students. So I gave a caseload of about 10 to give us some wiggle room if we have some additional students added on next year. That's where we are right now. If we needed to look at a larger caseload, we would just need to make sure that we handled that carefully and thoughtfully to make sure that we were still giving all of our students what they needed in that process.
But it's not, because my concern would be that over time, whether or not the position would be viable, because as long as there's sort of like a steady sort of history of the same number of students over time, and we can actually anticipate that continuing?
I understand what you're saying. So right now, my belief is that yes, this position would remain vital and necessary over the upcoming years. And I don't see, like right now I look at the Teen Center and I look at how vital the Teen Center is. They service a lot of students. They give a lot of support to a lot of students. So I don't see this as something that would go away. I see this as something that would definitely be necessary. Would this look exactly the same year over year? It might look a little different. If the case management component goes down, then perhaps this person would pick up some additional case management that might not necessarily fall under this umbrella. But I do see the need for these mental health services continuing year over year for both of these schools to fill a need that I feel right now is unmet. Does that answer your question? Okay, good. Yes, ma'am.
So this position then would serve both Irving and Bartle students that are in
Correct.
each of those schools?
Yes.
And, well, I would imagine with us having a 40% free and reduced lunch rate, that even if the numbers went down in terms of that specific population as they age up into the middle school, et cetera, there would still be a need for other types of services that a social
Absolutely.
worker would be able to do.
Absolutely. And this is something that I'm looking at that's kind of above and beyond what a normal case manager would do. The case managers that work with our students who are classified right now really kind of, they have so many students and they can only get to so much. And these are additional needs that are kind of above and beyond that typical case management. So this person would continue to provide those supports both to families and to students. Okay.
So these are responsibilities that are not currently being handled in the school, and especially by the current staff, the school psychologist, et cetera. This is a position that can go far beyond that and is not duplicative.
Correct. So do we have counseling being provided to students right now? We do. However, it's not as involved as what some of these students need. Some of these students need very intensive therapeutic interventions, and we just don't have the capability to be able to do that with the existing staff. We really need somebody who's dedicated just to doing that.
Sorry. Can you tell us more about the flex scheduling and why that is necessary? I know we talked about that in the curriculum committee
Yes.
meeting, but
So one of the components we want to be sure that we target is that we provide supports for our students that don't just exist in a vacuum. They don't just exist in school. These are supports that really encompass the whole child's life. That means working very closely with families to make sure that they have what they need as well, and that we're able to have this mental health specialist provide services to the students but also to the parents. So a lot of parents work. If the mental health specialist wanted to have a family therapy session and the parents work all day, they're not going to be able to work that out, and I don't want to put parents in a situation to have to start looking at taking off work to try to get in and do all these things. So the way Dr. Taylor and I would like to frame this is that we have the flexibility with the schedule to provide that individual the ability to meet with parents at a time that's more convenient for them. So if they need to do a family therapy session and the parents aren't available until 5 o'clock, then they would come in later in the morning because they would work later in the evening. So they would still work the same number of hours. They would just flex it back and forth so that they're able to meet the particular needs of the families and the individual students that they're working with. Okay.
And the only other question I had is, do we have a job description yet for this position? So
Right now, it could fall under the child study team job description. It could fall under the social worker job description. We may want to look at potentially writing a separate job description. We haven't really dug into that component that much. It could fall under the existing job description, but we might want to write one that's more specific to these particular needs.
okay.
Can I just add something? This sounds like an excellent program for the kids to get them extra help and special help that they need. Something that the board is aware of, but the community might not be aware, is that any child we send out of district for special education needs costs the district between $40,000 and $100,000+. So keeping the kids in district and getting the family counseling as well obviously has merits. But the other merit is that if we had some percentage of these 10 children need to go out of district, and we are a very small district, those numbers could cost us $500,000 or $600,000 in a budget that's capped and a budget that's always being pressed from every direction. So this is, to my perspective, a very wise investment for the district.
Says the Finance
other-
Committee Chair.
Says the
after
Finance
months
Committee
of
Chair.
budget meetings.
Who's in the middle of budget discussions.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions for Susie?
In terms of the position, since this person is going to be doing therapy, clinical therapy, are you looking for someone who is already, like, doesn't need supervision, someone who has clinical supervisory certification?
That would be my preference. That would be my preference. I would really honestly prefer someone not only in that situation, but also that already has some school experience, so that they understand that dynamic, because private therapy and working with a school is a little different, and my preference would be someone that is not currently in need of supervision, but also has that experience as well.
Great.
And I'm sorry, maybe you covered this and I missed it. Were you looking to fill this position this year or for next school year?
Definitely for next school year. If we could do that for the end of this school year, that would be my preference, because the longer these students wait for the services that they need, the less productive we are in helping them be successful in school and receive the benefits that they need educationally, socially, and emotionally.
Right. It seems like it might be a tricky position to fill, though, with the
It might.
juggle of...
It might.
It actually reminds me, over the summer, do we have resources that we provide to these kids, this group of kids, Irving and Bartle kids that would need these services? Do we provide them the option of that kind of intervention over the summer?
Currently, we do not have that, so our students do not receive that in their ESY program. That's something we would like to incorporate as a part of this program, because leaving the students without the supports that they need, especially students in need of very intensive supports, leaving them without those supports over the summer is not beneficial for them or the families. So it's something that we would like to build in as a component of the ESY program, so that the families and the students continue to get what they need over the summer.
So for right now, are you looking at this as a 10-month position or a 12-month position?
Well, the way that we work it right now, our child study team is a 10-month position, and then they have summer hours to work on case management over the summer. So this individual would be a 10-month employee, and they would get summer hours the same as the other child study team, but what they did with that time would be different. So rather than doing evaluations and the different components that our child study team typically does over the summer, they would be providing direct services to the students.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms.
Susie.
Burdine.
My pleasure. Thank
You are free to go home after a long day. I'll continue my report by doing something I do once a month as of last month, and that is to highlight a program that folks may not be aware of, and I'm glad that members of the community have come out, because this is one in particular I'm sure if you have older kids didn't know existed. It's called Reading Buddies. In fact, tonight my two program spotlights have to do with some of the reading programs that we are implementing to supplement the instruction during the day, during the week. So Reading Buddies is a program for second grade students this year. We're going to expand it into third grade next year. It's a collaboration with the Graduate School of Education at Rutgers. We have, let me go back. We have college students who are coming on Saturdays to Bartle for 2 sessions, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, for about 2 hours at a time, sit side by side and read with some of our struggling readers or our English language learners. And on any given Saturday, we have a handful, I wouldn't say more than 2 hands, a handful of students who come and camp out and read with their kids. It's a very unique program. I'm not aware of something like this outside of our area because it is a partnership with Rutgers. The second spotlight I want to put on one of our special reading programs has to do with something one of our teachers did for Read Across America. I've got to tell you that both Irving and Bartle were just alive this past week, and members of the board who came along with me for a tour saw it firsthand. Kids dressed up, teachers dressed up. They really went above and beyond. One of our teachers actually set something up called Camp Read A Lot. This is actually Miss Leeper's Bartle classroom. She set up a campsite. the kids brought in sheets, blankets, bean bags, rockers. There were lights that they set up. They turned the big lights off and they set up little mini lights. Students rotated through something called the Daily Five, which is our management model we use when kids are broken out into small groups to do some independent literacy work. And so they basically engaged in their Daily Five centers in the campsite around different areas of the room. After the activity, the kids reflected on how their brains grew, their mind grew, and they reflected on their opinion of what it's like to read in a comfortable environment. I mean, the whole idea, of course, was to encourage a love for reading by doing it in a very conducive environment. So that's just a little highlight of programs for now. Next month, I'll come back to the board and the community with another program highlight. The second part of my portion of the superintendent's report is to give you an update on the progress we're making in the area of the strategic plan goals. We've got 11 goals. Let me go back to my slide that shows you where we stand overall. We still have yet to implement 11 action steps. There are something like 80 plus action steps across the 11 goals that the community back in June, and then continuing during meetings I've had with small groups of parents, board members, teachers, and administrators, and some residents who don't have kids in the schools, is a little ambitious. I think what we're realizing is we have to slow things down just a bit. I anticipate we will have at least started a few more action steps by my next report. The things I want to highlight, the late breaking news, the things I want to highlight for you tonight include, finally, the return of the Bartle Social Emotional Learning Lab. This is something that went away about 3-4 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. I know it left with the departure of a guidance counselor who also retired. Dr. Maurice Elias, who he and I work closely on a number of projects, who actually helped start the program, is waiting in the wings to support us once again. Tracy Maiden, one of our Bartle teachers, has taken personal responsibility. It's actually part of a program she's enrolled in to learn more about social emotional learning, has taken personal responsibility for bringing back the lab. So we expect the lab in some form will be up and running in April. What our vision is, mine, Dr. Elias's vision, and Tracy Maiden's vision, is to, starting next year, bring back some of the graduate students from the applied psychology program who were so instrumental in staffing the lab starting in September. I'm taking responsibility for this one, homework. We are also starting to do the legwork it takes to have a very meaningful dialogue about homework. It's going to start with a survey that I'll be administering to different constituencies, teachers, parents, students, obviously the leadership team. The survey in itself has been a challenge. I came up with a draft. There was some concern about the nature of the questions. So what I've decided to do is seek input from teachers in particular and some other members of my leadership team to develop a survey based on some sample surveys I've received from districts around the state. One district in particular, led by a superintendent who I'm quite friendly with, Freehold Township, has put itself on the map for the way it's reformed homework in such a way that it is more meaningful and looks out for the health and well-being of the kids, both intellectual and psychological. Board members have the option to click a link to a study about where the United States ranks in terms of how much homework it assigns kids. My game plan before the year is out is to have the survey results in hand and then convene focus groups of parents, teachers separately, students, members of the leadership team, during the course of hopefully the school day, if I can gather these groups, seek their input, collect all the data, and then slowly but surely reflect on our practices. And I'm not talking about putting any kind of hard, fast rules out there yet. I do want to hear and listen to what the community has to say about homework. It's a touchy subject. I actually went down this road in Little Silver when I was Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and it definitely brings out different opinions. So we will do this carefully, but only after I've collected my data through focus groups and surveys. I also want to touch on the goal that has us looking at professional development to foster more cultural competence. We have been doing a number of things in this area. First of all, the community board should know that on February 21st, when our kids were home, our teachers were in workshops all day. For the half day in the morning, middle and high school faculty worked with Dr. Robin Daniels, who's an expert in the area of cultural competency, having some very sincere and honest conversations about multiculturalism, educational equity, and some of the things we need to do here in Highland Park to do better in those areas. She also, a week prior to that, came out to conduct a cultural competency audit. She actually went to classrooms, looked at walls, sat in on some lessons, interviewed some teachers and members of the leadership team, some kids, to get a sense of how sensitive we are to the diversity that we are as Highland Park. And next week, speaking of diversity, I'm going to be presenting a demographic report that will also include a breakdown of our students according to ethnicity, race, country of origin. Mr. Brzezowski helped me put that information together. I believe we currently have, and I might be a little off on this, Mr. B, but I believe we have students coming from 30 different nations right now across the district. I'm way off, 51, forgive me.
You were close.
I'm not good with numbers. Anyway, I'm going to share all that information with the board, the community, next week. I can't wrap up my pathway update without touching on the second focus area, which has to do with quality education and differentiating instruction. One of the things that we knew we had to do even better than we've done before is pull upon the expertise of our staff, the people we have in-house, to conduct professional development. I mean, the research says, and I don't think it takes research to know, that peers will more likely feel vested and interested in what their peers have to share rather than strangers who they don't know nearly as well, or with whom they don't have the same level of trust as they do their peers. We had 25 workshops being conducted on the afternoon of our PD day, and we ran them as choice workshops. Teachers could choose from among 25 workshops that related to their needs. We identified the topics based on surveys we produced, the goals in our strategic plan, and then any other gaps we felt we needed to fill. 22 out of 25 of those workshops were facilitated by our own staff, and that includes principals. Ms. Freeborn, I conducted a workshop. I believe, I know Dr. Nicosia and Ms. Ackley conducted workshops as well. So our model, which we are going to sustain, now has us using this half-day whole group workshop setting and then half-day choice, mostly using folks in-house. Are there any questions about the strategic plan from the board? Public can ask questions during public comment before I move on to my last piece.
The only, it's more of a comment than a question. I think the thing that we learned with Bartle and the kind of demise of the social emotional learning lab and now it being brought back is that it's really tricky to tie it to any one person because then you lose that person and then you lose that knowledge. So I get a little nervous when I hear, one person is taking this on. I think we've got to find a way to spread that out.
I agree.
Throughout the building, make multiple people responsible for it. So if we lose one staff member, we don't lose all the knowledge and information that goes with that, because this, I think, has been a really crucial piece, and we've seen some of the damages of some of those kids moving through Bartle and then coming to the middle school without having had that social emotional piece. So I'd hate to see us drop that ball again.
Fair point. I'm going to wrap up with everyone's favorite presentation I have to do twice a year, and that is the latest data we submitted to the state as part of the Electronic Violence and Vandalism Report. I will report out tonight, September to December data on various categories that spells out the frequency of incidents in these areas. And then in June, or probably in July, I'll report out on what we refer to as period 2, which is January to June. What I've done for you in the next 2 slides is show you any increase or reduction in the frequency of certain issues over the last 4 years. Actually, the data I am showing you, FYI, 2013-14 to 2016-2017, is all for the same period of time, September to December. So the 2013-14 number 8 is only referring to those months, not the entire year. So obviously we have an uptick in violence. I don't have any clear explanation for this. It's no different than the explanation I'm trying to make for why we're seeing, as Ms. Boudin mentioned, an increase in the number of kids who come to us with challenges, with some serious emotional challenges. I mean, there's just so many influencing factors. On the other hand, incidences of vandalism are down. These are all, again, all the reported incidences that we collect, put into our student information system, and then report out to the state. HIB cases are up, and so far our numbers are probably going to look similar. We've had several cases in January, no cases in February. The substance abuse numbers will change as well. We may have a couple of cases that I'll have to report on come June. You can see we had 2 last year. And then so far we have not had any students who've possessed weapons in school. Something I did per the request of the board last year, which I'm doing again for you this year, is a breakdown by building. I'll just let you look at the numbers. I'm not going to go over all of them. This is just 2016 period 1 data.
And I think that spike in middle school, we could potentially relate back to what we were just talking about.
And I guess it's worthy of me sharing this now, very briefly. Discipline is more than just looking at the data. I mean, discipline is talking about how the adults and the kids are relating to each other in this school. And I'm learning more about that thanks to a group that I put together. Ms. Richardson serves on that, in that group. It's called the Discipline Study Group. There are about 13 of us. I've got 2 students, 1 junior, 1 senior at the table. I've got 4 teachers, a couple of principals, myself, Ms. Richardson, Dr. Roth, psychologist from the Teen Center. We had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about relationships. And it directly relates to behavior. And a lot of honest things came out of that. And I'm not going to take up the time now to discuss that. I'll report out about our findings before the year is out. But this group is going to meet again. And I'm hoping that between the work we're going to be doing in that area and the work we're doing in the area of restorative practices, which I didn't mention, I just want to mention that before I shut things down tonight, I hope we'll make the data look a little different, but more importantly, create a more nurturing, loving environment for all the kids in our school district, which is what we need. Quickly, speaking of restorative practices, you got my Honeywell last Wednesday. I didn't get into specifics. I will say that as of Friday, I had a phone conversation with the organization we'll be working with called the International Institute for Restorative Practices. They're based out in Bethlehem, IIRP. We are going to be having them come to us in mid to late May to train, we hope, between 6 and 12 teachers. We're still identifying volunteers. And that'll be a 4-day experience in which the teachers are trained on basic restorative practices, strategies. Then those teachers will come back in the summer, probably at the end of June, before everybody goes off to vacation, to spend 3 more days with the folks from IIRP here in our school district. And that's the training they'll receive to help them train their peers. And then we hope in September, at this point, if the plans go as they should, we'll have the 6 to 12 teachers train their peers, the whole staff, middle and high school, not Irving and Barlow yet, just middle and high school, in September, so we can kick things off during the year. So with that, I open up for questions about EVVRS, or discipline for that matter.
Anybody have anything for Scott?
I would just say that, the middle school numbers are obviously, worthy of note. And I think it's, like you were saying, Darcy, it's interesting how they coincide with the social emotional learning lab being, I don't know, eliminated, I guess is the best word, because there's nothing there. But also, there was a deficit in our health curriculum in the same way. So when you're talking about, people having relationships and friendships and, knowing the difference between a healthy relationship and something that's abusive, I think that was something that was definitely covered at Bartle. The years that my kids were there especially, I remember that. And then, recently that was done away with. And I think it's, something to remember when we're looking at these middle school numbers, because I think it might have a lot to do with the fact that these small problems in Bartle were never addressed and then perhaps multiplied or, became more complicated as they grew. So I'm glad to see that back.
Me too. Okay. No one else has anything for Scott? All right, so we will move on to our committee reports. So Michelle, you want to go first for curriculum and instruction?
Sure. So we have the field trip requests, as you see on the attached paper, and that's item number 2. Item number 3 is a resolution to approve the HIB incident report for February. Item number 4 is the resolution to approve the elimination of the U.S. History Honors label in the high school. Number 5 is a resolution to approve the following staff to write STEAM curriculum over the summer for the summer camp. To write the curriculum currently to be implemented in the summer camp program. So that would happen March 17th.
Wait, you have that as 5?
Yeah.
No, 7.
No, I think you're...
Do you have the paper copy? Is it different on the paper copy?
Yeah, you know why? Because the U.S. history was moved to 3.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
Scott, we didn't,
I have the digital
our copy, the copy in our drive didn't get updated.
Yeah.
With the 3 resolutions?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Sharice.
Yay, thank you.
Can I see your copy?
Yeah, the digital copy.
Oh, okay, okay, but the paper copies reflect that.
So
Okay.
everybody, if you don't have a paper copy, we should be looking at the paper copy because what's on paper doesn't match what's on our
Okay.
drive.
So disregard those numbers I just read you.
Yes.
Okay, so what we're doing is from number 4. So number 4 is the elimination of the U.S. History Honors course. And also number 5 is the elimination of the CP history course. And in place of that, number 6 appears to approve the following course, U.S. History 2. And that would be a heterogeneous grouping of those students in formerly CP and honors. So rather than 3 history courses, CP, honors, and AP, there would now be just number 6, U.S. History Honors. U.S. History 2. Number 7 is the resolution to approve the STEAM curriculum writers for March 17th for the summer camp curriculum. Number 8 is the resolution to approve staff participation in the DEAC meeting, which is the District Evaluation Advisory Committee with Dr. Taylor and the leadership team on March 17th as well. And as you can see, there's a mix of teachers there. There's only one Irving teacher. Was not sure if there was a reason for that, but just wanted to kind of highlight that. So maybe we could talk about that. And number 9 is a resolution to approve a 3-hour training session of the verbal behavior milestone assessment and replacement and placement program. I'm so sorry. This is through the Ed Services Commission. This is Monday, March 13th for Irving staff, select members of the Irving staff, I'm sorry. And that is it. Any questions?
Can you just talk a little bit about number 7, the STEAM curriculum for the summer camp program?
I don't have much information on that. I'm going to give that to Dr. Taylor.
That's a good question. So we're working with Elsie Dublin Foster's organization and Elsie's Homestays to host for 2 weeks Chinese students from China, to join some of our students who want to participate in this series of programs in a camp
This is
setting.
at the,
It'll be at the high school.
but this is through the rec camp program?
No,
or
no, no, no,
separate?
I'm sorry.
This is
We are going
separate.
to host it, so it's through us.
Okay.
Our teachers will facilitate the work, the classes, and it'll be open to students who wish to participate.
For no cost, or is there?
At this point, no cost.
Okay. Sounds good, thank you.
Is that a high school level program then? Is it a middle school program, high school program?
It'll be a high school program. And we'll, once we get this off the ground, obviously we'll make sure we advertise to the whole community, so anybody who wants to get involved can get involved. Might have to be on a first-come, first-served basis, depending on the interest level. It's the first time we've done it. I have to thank Elsie. It's coming mostly from her.
Yeah,
We're signing on.
Looks interesting. I'm excited to hear more about that.
And can you just talk a little bit more about the District Evaluation Advisory Committee?
Sure.
And what the goals are going to be there? And then that doesn't have any, hourly rate attached. Is
No,
it-
there's no pay. We've been meeting, I think the DIAC, as it's referred to, has met 2 times already. We meet about 4 or 5 times a year. It's a committee, a standing committee of teachers and members of the leadership team who check in about the state of teacher evaluation. And that could be everything from lesson planning, since we do evaluate teachers on their lesson plans, to the kind of feedback we're giving teachers, the model, the instrument we're using. This is actually a state-mandated organization committee, but I think Mr. Presti would agree, we pride ourselves on the collaboration that goes on. The reason why we're putting it on the agenda, thank you, Mr. Presti, the reason why we're putting it on the
Got a
agenda
nod from the back, yeah.
is because we start the practice of making sure the board recognizes that we are pulling teachers out of classes that would require substitute coverage. So anytime we do that, we will put an item on the agenda.
Gotcha.
They'll be out for a half a day.
So they're not being compensated, but there will be subs.
But there'll
that
be
will
substitutes filling in
Right.
for them.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. If nobody else has any questions about, yep. Okay.
I did have some comments on the elimination of the Honors History 2 and the change. And first of all, I want to thank Scott and the team for putting together a really interesting and informative forum last Tuesday, in which there's a lot of discussion about, first of all, the 5-point bump, but also to explain what is going on with the change in honors. And if you'll bear with me, I put some thoughts together I wanted to read through, and then we could talk about it some more or talk about it during public comment, because I think some folks are going to probably want to hear more. But I think we should recognize that we have been back and forth on the changes over the years. About a dozen years ago, and for a period thereafter, I'm not certain what the exact years were. We had an Honors History 2 that was eliminated that did create a CP and an AP only. Now we are hearing, in this case, we are not going to have a CP. We are going to have a History 2 level, a grade level for 11th graders. Not certain how many years that scenario lasted, but it was ultimately reversed. And I am interested in what caused the honors to be reinstated, so that, because we have had it now back for a number of years. Anecdotally, I did hear that some students who would have benefited from an honors offering at that time felt that the CP class moved along slowly for them, and that some students were disinterested in participating in class discussions, which is fairly common in high school at times.
You don't say.
This was prior to a more general acceptance of the concept of differentiated or individualized instruction, which today has taken hold, and I think we've taken large steps forward, and we're working on it dramatically here in Highland Park. I would like to think that a classroom experience which brings together students from varied backgrounds and success levels can and should absolutely be successful, but we need to be prepared to address each child's needs so that they can be motivated to perform and achieve at his or her own highest level and to reach their highest heights. And we need to continue to stay focused on our very youngest and middle-aged kids as well, because this change in and of itself is not a solution to the issues that we face as kids age up. There's a real concern that the eliminating of honors could be moved to push some kids down rather than to pull kids up. So when we are saying we are attempting to reduce the achievement gap, we want to know exactly how this will happen. Will it come at the expense of kids who are willing to work hard to participate in an honors class? Could we increase participation in honors curriculum through some other method? And I do understand we're proposing to change the name of the course, as we talked about. Would this be a newly written curriculum? Would it be the same as what we're offering now to CP or to honors only? And would that be written this year in time for the 2017-18 school year, if so? Personally, I'm envisioning a scenario in which those kids who would like to go above and beyond within that classroom are encouraged to do so and are rewarded for their work. And I'm envisioning students being assigned varied readings that are at appropriate levels for them, but which lead back to centrally themed classroom discussions, which could be truly valuable for everyone. But I am interested in how this will work, and I think that it's worthwhile to have this conversation and to bring it out in the open and talk it through.
Do you want
Thank
to
you.
respond a little bit to Rob's comments now?
I don't know which to respond to. Look, I'll just say this. The faculty believes at this point we are prepared to begin successfully promoting a heterogeneous classroom in this particular subject next year, not all other subjects, starting in September. We wouldn't go forward if we didn't feel we could support the bill of sale that we're putting out there. So to us, we're 100% confident that we can make this work. And I don't know if it's worth rehashing everything that was said at the forum, but I will if you'd like me to.
Yeah, well,
If
for
you could
those of
summarize
us who
it
weren't
for
there,
us, yeah, I think that would be valuable.
appreciate that.
If you could
You
summarize.
want me to touch
it.
on some of the points that were
Yeah,
made?
I think that would be valuable.
So, Mr. Lassiter pointed out that we have 22 students currently in the history honors program this year. We have seen slight decrease in enrollment over the last 5 years. The faculty first pitched the idea when they realized there were numbers of students in the current honors program that would have taken AP had their schedule allowed for it. And that's really what was the impetus to start the ball rolling on this. When they got down to it, they realized if they reduce a section of one thing, in this case honors, they'll make a teacher available to teach a third section of AP, which could be potentially populated by all 22 students who would have conceivably wanted to take it this year. Now, we recognize there'll be some students who don't want to go that next route. And some of the parents who are in the audience tonight mentioned the concern that some of their kids might not want the stress levels associated with an advanced placement course. We get that. And then an honors class might be the next step back that allows them to maybe get top-heavy in science and math and not so much in the humanities. Mr. Broadfoot's response to that was, a student is not required to take the advanced placement test if he or she takes the class. And one of the biggest stressors in the program is obviously preparing for the test. So, so that was one way he suggested would allow students who want to take the class, get the extra weight, and now that we're grandfathering the sophomores, in this case, gets the extra 5 points in AP, without having to have that undue stress of preparing for the test. I don't know what more there is to say. Rob, I know you were there the entire evening. If I'm missing anything, please share.
I guess I would ask if you could describe what the content of the grade level, 11th grade honors history 2
Well, this I could
would
say.
be.
The curriculum is identical between the honors class and the current CP class. The only differentiation in curriculum was between the AP class and then the CP and then honors class. The difference was about the delivery of instruction. It was about accelerated content delivery, going into more depth into certain topics in the honors program and not so much in the CP program. And that's something that, you know, our staff is trained to do, the likes of Tomlinson and all the gurus on differentiated instruction. Again, we're talking about a particular content area with very strong faculty who were prepared to go the route of differentiating instruction effectively. They would not come to us if they didn't feel that they were well suited to do this.
And I mean, something that made me feel much more confident when we were talking about this was Michelle, I think at the last meeting or 2 meetings ago, was talking about different classes that she takes, which are just, you know, there isn't an honors AP or CP level. It's just, you're taking that class, you know? So to me, this is that class, and the expectation for all the kids in that class is going to be the same. And then if the teachers can differentiate instruction and move some kids further and faster, then they will. So, but that the expectation is not that we're going to reduce down the level. Everybody's here, and then if some kids can go faster and farther, then they will. But the idea is never to move anybody down. The idea is to move everybody up. I mean, if the idea was to move everybody down, we'd get rid of AP. I mean, that's where you'd get rid of the top, is to get rid of AP, to take these 2 levels and just say, we're not going to accept that there are going to be kids who are going to be down here and aren't going to get, hate this word, a rigorous curriculum. We're just not going to allow that to happen anymore.
Right.
So,
And as a goal, I support that, and I'm hopeful that it can be carried through in the way that it's
Right.
designed.
and I think that's the reason to do it now and to have all these conversations, is to make sure, you know, we now have strong supervisors, you know, curriculum over the curriculum, to make sure that that curriculum is in place, to make sure that the professional development covers any training that those teachers might need. I mean, this isn't doing this at the last minute, or, you know, we're doing it in August and it's going to happen in September. We're talking about it now so that we have all those pieces in place.
So are more kids who are current of the 22 that are this year at the honors level, and of the about 50 that are in the CP, are more of them being encouraged to try to push up to the AP level at this point?
I can't say that with 100% surety, but I would encourage the teachers to do so if they felt they could be successful. Not all students will necessarily be successful. But look, we are using multiple measures, which we haven't done in the past as well. You know, in the past, I understand teacher's recommendation was it. Either the teacher says you're in or you're out. Now we're looking at different measures. We're looking at whatever standardized assessments we may have to our avail. We're looking at grades. I do want to add something. I alluded at the forum to a survey that I did, but I didn't have the data in front of me. I'm pulling it up. We looked at, Mr. Laster and I looked at some other schools in the area, and we looked at a lot of schools. Some of the more high-performing schools that are following the model we would like to follow include Metuchen. Their junior US 2 program comes down to 2 courses, AP US History 2, US History 2. Monroe's junior program actually has them taking world history and geography as juniors, and then as seniors they can take US History 2 or US History AP. Again, no honors program there. South Brunswick, same thing. they have two sections, or two tracks, you could say, two levels of U.S. history. So we're not doing this in a vacuum. We're looking at some other schools that may have done it successfully and going from there.
Right, and we're also not doing it across the board. You know, as we said multiple times, this is in history. We're not doing it in every discipline. So it's a systematic approach. And I think if anybody in the community can see from Dr. Taylor's work since he's been here, there's not a lot of knee-jerk decision-making. There's a lot of meetings. There's a lot of, you know, consulting with teachers, consulting with parents, consulting with students even, you know, dialogue at the board table. We talk about this for months at a time before we make these decisions. You know, everything is very carefully laid out and planned out and, you know, I think well executed. So
if I could just add, like, with whatever authority the curriculum committee head has, you know, I feel that the success of a situation like this type of change, like Dr. Taylor said, is kind of contingent on a staff that can handle these different levels in the same classroom, right? So being able to differentiate is critical to the success of a change like this, because, you know, you can put a label on the classroom and change it, but if the actual teaching and, you know, the receiving of the information is not, you know, compatible, right? If we're not actually giving the kids what they need in an individual sense, then this is not going to work. Then it's just a label change. You know, then it's just makeup and superficial. But something that you mentioned in your superintendent's report, Dr. Taylor, was the PD and support for differentiation goal. And that action step 2.3B and 2.3D, those things are on our list for this reason. This is exactly what we're going to make those goals for. So our plan is already in place. Like, this is the change that we're looking at. And the reason that we're looking at history, I think, I'm just kind of guessing here, is because history is our strongest department, if I can say so. I mean, that's my experience as a parent, for sure. Like, from middle school onward, I've seen, you know, my kids who are not really all that interested in history just become obsessed over the content. So I think that, you know, we have to we have to take pride in our strengths. We need to build on our strengths. And our history teaching staff is one of our greatest strengths in this district. So I think it makes sense that history is the first place that we look from a curricular vantage point to heterogeneously group the children in those classrooms and provide what they need. And then that becomes a model for perhaps other departments to take that on. We can even, you know, like the PD and support for differentiation is one of our goals. So having success in one of our departments would be a place of what they call turnkey PD, where we would be able to send teachers from other departments into the history department. You know, it's not something that I can plan. I'm not, you know, superintendent, but I'm just saying this is the idea from what I understand. The idea is to build on our successful departments and differentiate deeply in one area, and then to use that in a ripple effect to provide PD and support for other departments.
I do want to point out that we're putting our money where our mouth is. We're not just writing a strategic plan and then putting it out there on the wall and hoping it looks good. In February, we ran a number of workshops focused on project-based learning, which is a key strategy that theorists will tell you is helpful for those students who want that challenge. I'm looking at our Academy booklet, which is a series of offerings we provide teachers after school. And as soon as I can pull up the separate workshops, I'll give you titles. We have several workshops that are being offered to teachers just on differentiation of instruction. And let me remind the board that the teacher's contract does require teachers to give us 5 hours of professional development time outside of what we do on February 21st and September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So they do sign up for these workshops.
I also wanted to make sure that everyone saw that video that Ruth, that you sent out about Montclair's English. Was it sophomore year? It was sophomore year that the kids were taking. I think it might have been freshman or sophomore year. I don't remember. But so they had, I mean, we all saw this video, I hope, but I just want to point this out to the community that this video was made about Montclair's decision to heterogeneously group their English classes in either freshman or sophomore year in their high schools. So instead of having leveled English, they had kids who were of all different levels and backgrounds in these English classrooms. But not only that, they changed the curriculum to provide multicultural texts from which they could learn English. So they had stories of, an Indian woman who was divorced in India and had to, kind of manage her life in those terms. And they read a story about an African American, oh God, I forget what the text was. I remember the author, but anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that to have these discussions, especially U.S. history, right? U.S. history is something that anybody has an identity and a relationship to who lives in this country. To mix the conversation in a way that all of the students are together and giving, their own perspectives and maybe their own family stories in that room to the curriculum, to enrich the curriculum in their own way. It makes sense to have a heterogeneous grouping. So it's not necessarily about skill level. This is about superficial levels that exist for any number of reasons. Because kids don't generally just take CP because they can't get into honors. That's not always the case. So anyway, I think that the history curriculum lends itself to this type of learning. That was my whole point.
I would love to put that video up somewhere on the website. I don't know if you got a chance to look at it. It was a pretty inspiring video, I have to say, about the work that they did there. Did you want to?
I think that differentiated, providing in a differentiated learning.
Sharice, can you get closer to your mic?
Sorry. In a differentiated learning environment where the curriculum is well planned, and the fact that this is coming from teachers, it's a lot more work for teachers to teach in a differentiated classroom. So for them to come up and say, yes, we want this, they're making a commitment to the level of work that's going to be required for that. But I mean, in a differentiated classroom setting, you have the opportunity to differentiate for content. So some kids might just be, they have a very base knowledge. They don't really have much knowledge at all. They'll be just learning to comprehend the issues, learning for understanding, memorizing, definitions or something like that. And you'll have the next group of students who might be, trying to master the content through analyzing the information. And then you'll have another group that are at a mastery level who are going to create new things based on the information they already have. So you have that content differentiation, but then you also have the opportunity to differentiate for learning styles, for the process of learning. You have the opportunity to differentiate in terms of the products that the students create within the classroom environment, like what's the output piece, which can vary according to the level of understanding of the material. And you also have the opportunity to adjust for the learning environment and create a very dynamic classroom setting where people are able to work in stations, maybe one station over here, a couple little stations where people are standing up using computers, another station where people are sitting on sofas, and another little station over here where kids are sitting on the floor. Because all of the learning is differentiated, students also take ownership of their own learning, and they're really taking responsibility for that material and really taking it in. So I think that it gives the opportunity for us to develop a whole new vision of what learning is and how it works in the classroom. And in a lot of ways, it gives new opportunities for even the strongest learners to be able to really do something new and dynamic that would be actually limited in an honors classroom, because the curriculum is this, and this is where you can go. But if you're really soaring and you want to do this over here, you can go and you can do that. With your teacher's guidance, you are able to do that. And then the student who is like at a real base level can still feel mastery of material by using leveled readers, participating in class discussions, and, you know, being able to show their mastery in a different type of way. So it's a whole new vision of how education really can function as a dynamic process.
It's 21st century learning. I mean, and that's what we're moving towards. It's thinking and learning out of the box. How do you do it differently? How do you do it more creatively? How do you do it collaboratively? And I think that's what we're all, you know, hoping to move towards. So.
Right. And I think we've had this three-tiered system for quite some time, and we're seeing the stratification that goes along with that three-tiered system.
Certainly.
And
I just want to make sure that the most kids that we can possibly prepare to get ready to succeed and to get into college, we can help them do that.
well, it's
And that-
pretty
and
insidious
that-
to have a class called college
and-
prep that's we've all known for quite some while is not college prep.
Kind of hurts.
I'm with you on that. So if this can achieve that, then that would be a great goal. On the other hand, if it takes away from some kids' opportunities, that would not be a good outcome.
I think what we're saying is it's critical to have staff who can differentiate, because it's not going to happen without staff being masterful at differentiation, because that's really what it's about. And as Charisse was describing, it looks like something we've never seen before. It feels like something we've never seen before. You know, as older people, that's what I'm saying here at the board table. I think the students have been seeing that, but one of the quotes that I pulled out of that movie speaks directly to what Charisse was saying, and Michelle Fine spoke it, and she's a professor at CUNY, and she visited here, actually. It was such a thrill.
She did.
Yeah. And what she said was really powerful. She said, quote, "We don't need public education to reproduce social class and race discrepancies. We've got a larger society that's more than happy to do that. The task of public education is to interrupt those discrepancies and create a broader set of opportunities for everybody." So this is what it's about, opportunities. So there is no guarantee that everyone can, you know, achieve at high levels, as I think it was a previous board goal from years ago. Everyone shall achieve at high levels. Like, it was just, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about opportunities and support to achieve at high level. And I think that this change addresses that. I would hope that the teaching staff who's suggesting this, as Charisse had said again.
So just to keep in mind, though, that when we eliminate that class, we're eliminating a class that does offer a bump, a weighted number that can help some kids get into college.
Well, we would encourage those students to take the AP class if they were looking for that GPA bump. I didn't mention to the full board, but I'll make a bigger stink at this next meeting. The high school was just recognized by College Board for advanced placement district honor roll. We're one of 433 high schools across the country and Canada to receive this distinction, and it's based on us having increased access to AP for a broader range of students while at the same time increasing scores. So we do have a good track record of compelling kids to move forward to higher level classes like AP and then supporting them by getting a 3, 4, 5 if they choose to take the test.
Okay.
I don't know if we did mention that the student-to-teacher ratio would also be smaller with this change. So I think that that's a major point, you know, that with added need, you know, they would have added time to address each student's needs.
Right,
a
with the
smaller
exception of
class.
the kids who are currently taking honors. We now have a 10-to-1 ratio.
We still have the same number of students and the same number of teachers. We're not,
I understand, and I think it is a great goal to have smaller classes in general, which we would achieve with this. But the honors kids, who right now, and this does seem wrong, we have 2 classes of 10 and 12. So those are very, very small classes. So those kids will not be in 10-person classrooms.
going back to those 2 classes of 10 and 12, what prevented us from combining those 2 classes together, allowing more kids into the AP and having 3 sections of AP?
I have current enrollment.
Scheduling, I mean,
the
Scott had
schedule.
said that scheduling, a lot was the scheduling issue.
So we do have 22 students currently in US 2 honors this year and 46 students taking AP US history. If all those students, 68 students, were spread across 3 sections, just do the math. You're looking at class sizes at the elementary level, which is, low 20s, 20, 21. At most, if you spread them out and that's assuming all the 22 honor students were in AP. Be a total of 68 students between those 2 programs.
I have just 2 more questions. I think it's about semantics of like 4, 5, and 6. Looking at elimination of U.S. History CP, I'm just wondering if that's supposed to be U.S. History 2 CP, but then also looking at that in relation to the course program outline that we have for the district. We already, according to the program guideline, we already have U.S. History 2. We don't have anything that's listed as U.S. History CP. We already have a U.S. History 2 honors. So I'm not understanding what this is in relation to.
We would add, I don't believe we have I have to look at the program, but I don't believe we have a U.S. History 2. We have a U.S. History 1. I don't know if we have a U.S. History 2 in the program. I could check it now. But that's why we would create
I couldn't find it until I was looking at it during this discussion this evening, and I found it this evening and looking at it. It's listed in there. So I'm just.
So that shouldn't be U.S. History 2 CP, that's U.S. History CP?
I
That's what
don't
it
see
says.
anything listed as CP in the program guide from the high school.
I'm looking at the high school program guide right now.
And if we need to tweak some of that language in those resolutions by next week, that's
Yeah.
That's true.
not a problem. I mean, we're not voting
Oh,
on
absolutely.
anything tonight, so it's just for discussion. So
Yeah,
we
I think it's
can
page
make any changes
40.
based on the program guide.
Okay. Rob's right. We have a U.S. History 2 in the program, so we'll have to look at that. We might have to pull that resolution.
Okay. Is that everybody's questions on that? Okay. So let's move on to finance. Mark?
Yes. I wanted to apprise the board and the public that we've been meeting to go over the upcoming budget. We have to get a budget into the state by next week's board meeting. And we've been working...
Preliminary budget.
What's that?
Preliminary budget.
Pardon me.
Let's add that word in there.
Sorry. Well, the preliminary and the final are going to be the same number because we're pressed so hard from the top, meaning we can't raise the budget. We don't have much leftover banked budget cap, so we're pressed from the top. We're also pressed by the required numbers, the contractual obligations, the state health insurance plans, the inflation, the number of children coming into the district, which we heard about earlier, with special education needs. So it's been, I'm going to say, miraculous to get where we've gotten. I've been around a long time, and I've chaired a lot of finance committees, and I've never seen a budget that's been so very, very difficult to put into place without affecting the children in the district. And I think we're very, very close to having that done, which is fantastic. We do have a demographer coming next week, and will discuss with us the what looks like the future increased enrollment in the district based on new housing being built. So we should hear that report next week. As far as the agenda items numbers 2 and 3 are the usual bill lists. It's very small because we met just last week and then the week before, or 2 weeks before that. The item number 4 is the resolution approving a contractor from Educational Services Commission to train some of our educational services people, special ed people. It's a relatively small amount. The last 2 items, which are 5, 6, and then 7, 8, are items to renovate the high school baseball field and to do repairs for the high school gym, and specifically in the bleachers. So that's what we'll be going over next week. I think we do expect to have 1 or 2 more items coming up that just came up today, given the short amount of time, but they'll be on the budget, on the finance next week. Okay. And we'll be presenting a budget next week. Preliminary budget.
Does anybody have any questions for Mark? We do have a ridiculously small agenda this.
Yeah, it's very small.
That's good. All right, no one has any questions for Mark. We'll move on to personnel with Judy.
We actually have nothing on the agenda in the Personnel Committee, so we did have a meeting, though. We basically just went over staffing needs for next year. We are going to be, the leadership team is going to be participating in a job fair both at Montclair and Rutgers. And Scott is interviewing a person for the open LDTC position. That's about it. It's really very small meeting.
It happens sometimes. Okay, so we'll move on to equity and excellence. Sharice, do you have anything to report?
The only thing to report is that Equity and Excellence will be meeting on the 21st of March. And at that meeting, we'll be meeting with Jen Knapp to go over our comprehensive equity plan, which was submitted to Trenton last year, to make sure that we're in alignment with the goals that we set last year. We don't have to resubmit this year, it's just a review year.
All right, great, thanks, Sharice. So with that, we'll move on to public.
There's nothing interesting to say about policy except that we will be meeting, just as a reminder to board members, March 23rd. So we should all be looking over our selected policies. I know. I'll also be meeting with Dr. Taylor about some upcoming recent policy alerts, which we will want to integrate into our meeting. So I'll let you guys know what's happening with those.
So by the 23rd, each committee is supposed to be reviewing?
It's supposed to have reviewed the policies that the audit flagged as
Let's get going, people.
Esme Strauss having recommended these policies for update or for addition. I mean, some of the recommendations we're certainly going to reject, others not. And I'll be adding to the agenda based on what Scott tells me about the policy alerts.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All righty. So all committee chairs, you gotta.
I would ask my
Now's the
committee
time when you have to
members
harass
get
your committee members.
back to me, please.
Why are you looking at me like that, Mark? All right, so with that, we will move on to public comment. The Highland Park Board of Education welcomes public participation. Is reserved this time for your comments. Please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record and sign in on the sign-in sheet that is there, so Linda knows who you are later.
Sign in first.
I always find that works better. It's hard to write and talk at the same time.
Especially without my glasses. Okay. My name is Jay Cross, and I live on Harper Street. And I wanted to ask some questions about the history change that you talked about. Specifically, I understand the reasoning behind it and what you're planning, and you know, I think, you know, if the teachers think this is a good idea, you know, I'm not sure I want to go against that, but what I would like you to think about or talk about at some point, and perhaps you already have, is what you're going to do to evaluate this change and how you're going to think about the impact of it and the implementation, and what you're going to look at in terms of evaluating both of those pieces. So what will be your outcome measures that you're interested in for impact and evaluation and implementation of this policy change, especially if you're thinking about doing similar policy changes in the future, to think about, you know, how do we know that this accomplished the goals that we wanted? How do we know that it actually worked in its implementation? And what were any, you know, a lot of times with implementation, there are unintended consequences that you don't even know about until after you implement. And you have to be mindful of that and thinking about how you're going to look at that going forward. A couple of the things that I heard when people were talking was this question of stratification and opportunities. And so it sounded like that was kind of the things you're trying to target. And but those are very complex terms, and they need to be operationalized in a way that you'll be able to tell whether or not you actually address those issues. So I don't know if you can comment on that or if you've thought about it, and if not, I'd encourage you to.
Well, we have talked about how to assess the change, and right now we know we want to survey students at a midpoint and an end of year point to determine to get their impressions. Haven't thought about the quantitative data that we could collect on, to measure success, but that's something I need to think more about. I mean, it could be we obviously look at grades. We consider the value of the quality of the work that they're doing for us. But ultimately, I think it's going to be the kids' perception of how challenging the course was for them. If they are those students who we find out are, didn't want to go the next step into AP, would have gone to honors, but decided to take the on-level course, the History 2 course. I can't, regarding stratification, I'm not sure, if you can clarify your question about that, I'd appreciate that. Sorry. You had 5 minutes, so you have another, right?
We don't usually keep a watch.
Sorry, it was just a term I heard in the conversation from a board.
Digby?
From you, yeah. So I don't know what specifically you meant by it, so, but it sounded like it was something you were concerned about.
It's something that we've heard consistently, particularly in the high school, that our Black and brown students end up in one classroom, our white and Asian students end up in another classroom. And when you're walking down a hall and you see that with your own eyes, it's pretty jarring. So the idea is that we need to integrate we've basically been segregating within our buildings. And we really can't continue to do that. And this is a way to change that system.
So that sounds like a potential quantitative measure.
Right. And I so much appreciate, your ideas there, and I think you're right. And so, Scott, were you saying you were thinking of doing this next year, that next year you would survey the students at the midpoint, at the end of the year point? Could we potentially survey the kids at the end of the year this year as well, to kind of get like a barometer of how they feel about the class this year, and then you would have that to compare to the class moving forward? You wouldn't have that mid-year data point, but you'd have something from this year to kind of to compare that to.
I would think about it, but we're going to be comparing apples to oranges if I do that. Next year's course is going to look very, very different than anything we have currently.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's so I don't know how reliable the data would be.
Right.
If anything, I would rather get a September, December, June assessment of the kids' perceptions. How are they feeling going into the course? What were they thinking when they scheduled this course? And then, okay, so 4 months later, tell us how you're doing. Is it rigorous enough? Are you bored? And then in June, get another check. Maybe use the same survey questions.
Scott, if I could, could I just respond to that one point? I do like the idea of a baseline. I know the data, it's going to be very rough qualitative data. It's not going to be measurable in a quantitative numerical sense, but it would be nice to know at the end of this year, did the students who were taking the honors class feel that it was extremely challenging and extremely engaging and extremely participatory, such that if they don't say that next year, does that mean that the course was terrible? Or does that mean that, it was as engaging as it was this year?
Yeah, there's absolutely no harm in doing that, at least we have the data.
Right, and you could do it in all three levels. You could do it at the CP, honors, and AP level, and then next year you do it with the two.
Couldn't we also add questions to the survey to ask students to reflect on their history class they had previous and compare their experience in U.S. History 1 to the experience they're having in U.S. History 2?
U.S. History 1, though, is already heterogeneously grouped. There are no levels and there's no AP.
Right, well, it wouldn't capture that one piece.
No, that's world history.
Yeah, no, there's
No, that's what I mean. I'm sorry. The history course available for freshmen is world history. So there is no U.S. history.
Okay, so then why do we call it 2?
No,
there's a 1.
There is a
the
10th
grade is
10th grade,
history 1, and there's an
11th grade
honors
is 2.
component.
Okay, so I was confusing
So,
freshman
yeah.
year, sophomore
So I
year
was
history.
getting
Excuse
confused
me.
too. Stop confusing me, Michelle. So could we not do that, to add some reflective questions in, to have them think back?
Sure, I'll work with Mike, Mr. Laster, on that by the end of the week. We'll get to that. Thank you.
Scott, I'd like to add something. First, Jay, thanks. It's really a kind of a great, it's more than a question, just a great reflection and ideas for us. I would add to this, since a lot of this came from the teachers, that we get some feedback from the teachers, serious written feedback from the teachers. They've suggested that this would be better. and the principal has suggested this would be better, more than suggested. I mean, that's why we're going down this route. Let's get some feedback from them next year. And I would say as much as possible, as many as possible, to give us a feedback. How did this work this year, and how is it working next year, and compare the two of them? Because I think that would really help us.
I keep a to-do list that takes me to 2019, for real. So what I will do, though, is, in all seriousness, in December, I will report back to the board, the community, on the findings. I'll make a note to do that right now, okay?
Great.
Thank you.
I would just encourage you to go beyond the student attitude piece of it.
Right.
Not that student attitudes aren't important, but they're not, there's a lot of issues with measurement that you've talked about here already, and finding comparable information. But I do think if you can think about what are the objective outcome measures that you want to look at in terms of this change, what do you expect to see? That how will the school look different?
How do you measure it as
this?
success?
And how will you know in a year from now when you come back and say, did it work? Did we achieve something positive for the students and for the community? And I think that's, you need to be pretty rigorous about that.
So you're talking about real data, test result data, college entrance data, the kinds of data that would help us know that this was successful, not successful. And I agree completely. We should do this.
Well, and the luxury that we have here, which we haven't had for a long time, and anybody sitting out here will know, is we all have the benefit of continuity in terms of leadership. We haven't had that in so many years that it's been very hard to put these kinds of changes in place and do what you're talking about, that kind of necessary follow through to see and to gauge, is this working, and tweak and rework. We've just kind of had constant new ideas churning through the district, and now we've got significant leadership in all of our buildings, and we can take these kind of initiatives, take them on, and follow them through. So,
all right, thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Actually, so isn't, if I'm not mistaken, course scheduling is already in process for underclassmen?
God, look at him. I'm
ship
that gaze
is
right
course scheduling in process for underclassmen already? Yeah.
I know
We're working
that
on
eighth
schedules
graders
now, but
just
we're
got their,
No.
talking for next year.
So if this course hasn't been yet decided on, students are being recommended and thinking about whether or not they're taking CP, honors, or AP already. Okay. So what I was thinking is that you could look at what students plan to take in the old system and compare it to what course they actually eventually end up in. And that would give you some quantitative data on where students are placed based on where they would be originally.
Good idea.
And for the AP class, if most of the students, even those who would have been in honors in previous years, take the AP test, you can compare scores from next year with scores in past years to see if it's positively not affected or negatively impacted, to see how well the students are doing in that class, or how many students are choosing not to take the AP test. And something for that is that you can use AP test data to evaluate how well a class is being taught, and part of that is how many students take the test. But when a student doesn't take the test, I feel like it's assumed that they're not taking the test because they don't feel prepared for it, and not because they are in 5 AP classes and can't prepare for 5 AP tests, or because they can't afford to take 5 AP tests.
Right.
So I think that should be part, not maybe of the sign-up process, but there should be data collected on that as to why students aren't taking AP tests.
Yeah.
that would have to be something that would be in the survey, though, because that is information you can't glean without the student input. But
That would be really critical to know, though, because those tests are expensive, and it's not always a matter of success. I mean, I think we need to be careful about how we're defining success. I hear a lot about, you know, getting into a good college and a really solid transcript, and that is not a broad enough definition of success, in my mind.
Well, what I got out of this is we have to keep Lillian on the 5-year plan.
Yes.
So she doesn't leave us.
Bring a puppy,
Such
she'll stay
great
forever.
Lillian, are students not
And she
taking
likes dogs.
are students not taking an AP class because they can't afford it?
No, students are taking the AP class.
No, I'm sorry, the test. I'm sorry, the test.
Yeah. I can't speak for all students, but as a student who's currently in 5 AP classes, I could never take 5 AP
Yeah.
tests, even if I felt 100% prepared for all of them.
Yeah.
Just because those tests are $93,
Yeah.
and that's a huge amount of money.
Right.
So that's an issue that some
understand.
students face, yeah.
Okay.
And that's on top of having just paid for college applications, having just paid
SAT
for
tests,
putting up
SAT
money for
subject
proms,
tests.
putting up, right, subject test money. So it's a huge expenditure for seniors especially, all at one point.
Would be very, very helpful.
So it's really hard to decide what AP tests you're going to, and you don't want to take them, you don't know what college you're going to.
Hi, my name is Tomas Sanchez. I live on North 8th Avenue, and this is certainly not how I expected to begin my spring break, but given the issues here, I think it's pretty important for me to be here today. So I am a Highland Park alum, class of 2015. I'm currently a sophomore, and I'm very glad to hear that the class of 2019 for the high school has been grandfathered into the old grading system so that their grades across the board for AP and honors will not drop the 5 points. I'm here to represent the 20% of students who did take, or striving students who did believe in the system, where we took multiple AP and honors classes. So when I say striving students, I'm specifically talking about the students that are aiming to go to apply to Ivy League or very selective schools, where the acceptance rates are from 4.3% to 17%, which is very different from the different types of colleges that were offered at the forum. For the research gathered, where they said that the 5 points would not make much of a difference, just to reflect the acceptance rates for these schools range from 33% to 71%. So you can see the clear discrepancy between where 20% of my class was aiming and other people believe everyone should be aiming. So the problem I also have with this includes the honors, the elimination or the possible solution of eliminating honors classes and therefore polarizing 2 class types to AP and CP. So the problem with this that I see is similar to the issue that was brought up with the 5-point reduction, where colleges are, of the elite status or whatever you want to call them, are seeing students not taking the full AP, but instead taking CP, because there were students who did apply to these schools who took a mixture of both AP and honors. But with the revocation of the honors classes, they no longer will be able to take that, and so colleges will see this as a lack of ambition and moving down from honors to CP, which negatively affects the your possibility of getting into these schools, which are, of course, less than 5%, less than 10% acceptance rates. This also further, I believe, is not the correct solution to the original, from what I understand, was brought about by the fact that students were purposely skipping out on or missing both midterms and finals because they believed that the 5 points would help them with their grade and that they would not have to worry about that. I think inherently that system that we have in place is not accurately mirror that of the college experience. And if we're really trying to prepare our students to be in college, you have to keep aware that midterms and finals are such a crucial aspect of what we have to do. So for example, I'm taking midterms now and they're worth 66 to 87% of my final grade, which is a complete different structure for learning how to prepare for a midterm or a final, as opposed to being able to skip them or them only being worth 12.5% of the total grade in high school. So clearly there's an issue with students not learning how to prepare for a midterm or final, and thus being consequently negatively impacted, and to the point that Mr. Lasser brought up, that students feel that they're unprepared in their freshman year for different college classes. And I believe this is largely in part due to the fact that they don't know how to take midterms and finals, which are worth a large percentage of their grade and consequently cause them to fail or not do as well as they expected. So I think that is one of the most important points that needs to be addressed, and that the possible solution of eliminating the honors classes is not the correct way to go about this. And similarly, I'd like to address some of the points that the board members made here today. Dr. Taylor and Ms. Simrusty said that the honors and CP courses had the same curriculum, and that we would only be able to bump people up to AP, and that we wouldn't be bringing down the honors students. But inherently in that argument, if you're saying that the honors curriculum is equivalent to the CP curriculum, then there is no difference between honors and CP. You're directly stating that people are taking the same difficulty or same curriculum, same syllabus, so then there is no clear distinction between the honors and the CP. So inherently, you are bringing people down because they're not at the honors level that you explain for them to be at. In additionally, that can only be stated for the U.S. History 2 honors class that you're discussing, but of course there's a slippery slope argument where if it applies to that class, it can certainly apply to more than just that class over the coming years for future Board of Education members. Additionally, the idea that Ms. Richardson brought up with the honors students who should be soaring to AP and will not be brought down by the system of eliminating the honors classes and bringing them down to CP, the same argument could be made for those who are achieving at the top level of the CP classes, that they are not able to soar up to the AP because there is too large of an achievement gap between the CP level and the AP level, that there's no honors intermediate for them to ascend up to. So they're stuck achieving at the top of a CP level, which negatively impacts their college chances of getting into an elite school of that sense. So it was just my thoughts on that as a college student and someone who obviously graduated from this high school and would really like students to have the opportunity to apply to colleges that I did.
Thank you, Tomas.
Hi, my name is Chiara Cilerai and I live on 25 Grant Avenue. And I want to piggyback on what Tomas just said because I speak from the other perspective.
Just make sure you use the microphone.
I need to move it. Sorry.
Take it off.
So, yeah, I'll move it. Tomas was talking from the perspective of the student. I teach college and I teach mostly freshmen. And I understand exactly what he's coming from. But my concern here is actually kind of I want to go back to what's been said about the getting rid of this honors group of classes or just class at this point and just only having the CP and an AP and diversifying as much as possible the AP classes. The problem comes to, when you have to talk, even if it's the same curriculum, you're now having a curriculum that's worked with in very different ways if you teach it at an honors group of students rather than you teach it at the CP level. So my question is, how is it that it's going to be much easier for everybody, students especially, to be performing at a higher level in a class where there's more challenge for both teachers and students to do that? That to me is something that's really problematic because I teach college, I teach honors and non-honors courses, and I don't diversify in terms of my curriculum, but I do have to diversify extremely in terms of how I teach the same course to the different students and how I challenge students. And to take care of one group, I think the risk is that you don't take good care of the other group. And that's, to me, is quite problematic. So I'm really concerned. I'd like to hear more about the way that teachers are planning on working on these new ways of teaching and approaching the curriculum. Thank you.
I'm far removed from the classroom, but I can give you one example of how you could differentiate content in the area of history. So Mr. Broadfoot, if he were to be teaching this U.S. History 2 course, has, let's say, 20 students in his class. He could have, let's an even breakdown. Let's say 10 students are CP or on level and 10 are honors prep level. He could be giving different primary source documents to the different students depending on their need for challenge. I mean, the complexity of primary source documents can range from the most basic, a poster from the World War II, propaganda era to something as sophisticated as 1933 Nuremberg law documents. I mean, there are different ways. He'll be. Well, I see your nonverbals.
That I know, and I understand that can be done, but I'm thinking about this from the student's perspective, okay, and how much time in the class and throughout the semester and the year that those students can actually have the need to all come back up to the same level.
If you would like, you could speak with me, and I'd be glad to have one of our teachers work with you. I'm not in the trenches, and so it'd be hard for me to give you very specific details.
The teachers come up with more information about the way they want to implement this is really crucial to understand better the benefits or the downsides of having this change.
Scott, wouldn't it be possible to have a couple of the social studies teachers and Mike come out to a board meeting between now and the end of the year and
that's a
hash some of this out with us?
I could have them prepare a document that we can share along with notice to the families that if the resolution is passed, that we're going to move forward in this direction.
Yeah, the more information we put out, the better.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So whether they come to a meeting or you put something out,
we, or in the high school, there's already a set of courses that are that there's only a CP option and an AP option, and that's physics. And I think the fear is that with the history, it'll end up a lot like the physics, where there's a huge gap in between what I don't know what the CP physics class is called, and what the AP physics classes are doing. So I think that if this is implemented, you have to be really careful to make sure that it's an appropriate level for all the students. And if you're giving students different documents of distinctly different difficulties, how are you grading them in comparison to each other? Would students receiving the easier documents be getting worse grades because they're only meeting that expectation? But on the flip side, would students who are doing presumably more work, reading harder documents, not like have better grades because they're doing things that are more difficult in the same class? And
Well, if we were matching, let's say, the complexity of the documents to the capacity of the student, then the student shouldn't have to struggle through understanding, let's say, something as complex as the Nuremberg laws, the example I used. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. But if you have one student that's struggling through that and is maybe doing that with 80% of the understanding of that, and then you have another student having 100% understanding of World War II propaganda posters, the student who's understanding 80% of something incredibly difficult might end up with a worse grade, or coming out of the class with not a worse understanding but looking worse to colleges than a student who's analyzing things of a lower complexity with a higher accuracy. So, like, I think there are real questions about how you would grade this. Would people be reading these things and then doing that on completion and then taking a test to understand the factual knowledge, or would they be graded on their ability to assess these materials? Because that's
And that might be
really
something we
important
could
in
address
history.
in whatever we share with the public, whether it's live at a meeting or through a document.
That's precisely why I said that it's a complete rethinking of the educational process, because it's unlike anything you've ever experienced before in terms of how you know. But they're already doing this in Bartle School. There are no leveled classes in Bartle School. All kids are all together, and they're doing differentiated education in the classroom. Every kid is being graded based on how they are performing on the work that they are being given for their level of study. But it's a complete change from a sort of a traditional, academic preparation program. But one of the things it does is it fosters great creativity. And it also teaches students to be self-reliant in terms of their educational process, which is actually going to prepare them very well for college in a way that traditional education does not unless you're in AP.
There's still a worry that creativity doesn't show up on a college transcript, and whatever grade the person's getting does.
I understand that completely. I do work in a college environment. I am a freshman dean. I know fully well what that struggle is, both for the applicants as well as for my incoming freshmen.
So if this is to be implemented, it really needs to be thought out in a way that would not harm students, no matter what their level of comprehension is and what they'd be working on within the classroom setting.
Okay. Thanks, Leanne. Ken?
Hi, I'm Ann Betterton. I'm at 420 Grant Avenue. Full disclosure, my husband's one of those history teachers. We've been debating this in my house hotly for quite a while. And so interestingly, my daughter, who is a junior, interjected in our heated debate and said, I really can see this going in the opposite direction that it's intended, where the 22 kids in the US 2 honors class push to AP, and there's no change in the heterogeneous classroom making effort. And that at the forum last week, a parent mentioned that this has been tried previously, and that same thing happens where the kids, where the moment in the honors class, in the middle zone, where you can have more heterogeneous, where you can, as Tomas mentioned, have a stepping stone to the next level, that disappears, and then the breach and the divide is very large. What she mentioned, and we talked about, is how this decision came about. And while I really admire the history department's or social studies department's belief that those 22 honors kids can stretch to AP and do well because it is such a similar class, I've been told over and over again, the curriculum is very similar. One involves a little bit of a faster pace and a test. I said, who's asked those 22 kids why they are not in that AP? When the presentation happened at the forum, there were 2 of those 22 identified as having a schedule conflict and had to take the honors instead of the AP. That leaves 20 kids, each most likely with a different reason why that child did not choose to take the AP class. Then we heard from another parent who said her student, who's now in college, was a CP level. He stretched himself into honors and managed to do well in that class, and then stretched himself into AP for the first AP course he had ever taken. And now he is found a love of history in college and is becoming a really, focused student. Without that middle step, he wouldn't be where he is today. I'm drawing that conclusion, but I think that there's something to be said for that step being an important place for a lot of kids to stretch themselves. So one, why are those 20 kids not in the AP class, and what's the reasoning? My daughter named intimidation, concern, pressure, the lack of self-confidence to do the work of an AP class, the knowledge of the intellectual kind of the kids that are in the AP and how smart they are and feeling intimidated by that. Scheduling was an issue. I don't know what all the answers are for why those kids chose the honors class and not the AP class, but before we make this big decision, I think it would be really important to ask them that. Because if we want kids to strive to AP or strive to honors, then we should know what supports are necessary to get them there. So in all of this conversation, we started in my home to paint a different picture, which is, what do we want all of our kids to achieve in high school? Like, what's the level that we want them to stretch themselves to? As the curriculum instructor person said, what is success for us? And to me, one of the ideas we kicked around was, well, why not leave all 3 levels and then figure out a child's most, the area that they excel at, that we can guide them to the next level. So if they're a CP kid, say, you're really killing it in history, let's get you into honors and give it a try. And then once they get through the honors, say, you did that great, let's get you to try 1 AP. So to me, taking away these options isn't a roadmap to having our kids push themselves to the next level. So while I totally admire the board's embracing of learning for learning's sake, which I'm hearing a lot of, like, we want the kids to learn, we want them to be totally engaged in class at all times. I totally admire that. But what we see time and again is kids that can get into college and do well in college have better lives. They just do. It's just sort of a fact of our society. And so if we're not pushing them down that road, and in my opinion, honors and AP are a huge part of that road for many, many of our kids, and it should be for all of our kids. If we can get them there, then that's what we should strive to do. So it's really concerning to hear that the elimination of U.S. history to honors could be a model for eliminating this step across the board for our subjects. And we are living it with no physics honors program right now. The real translation of that move for our kids in an environment where college admissions, and I'm sure everyone's sick of hearing this, is at a level of competitiveness, and not just at the selective. We're talking like everywhere. More kids applying to college, no new spots opening in college over the last 30 years. But luckily, more kids interested in going to college. These honors courses, AP courses, the 5-point bump, the 1-point bump for AP, they matter like they have never mattered before. And so to me, let's not reduce those options for kids. Let's figure out how we can get kids to step to the next level, be supported, and hopefully strive to be able to get, one AP or more, or as many as they can handle on their transcript so that they can go to school both prepared, but self-confident and ready to move forward. So that's just sort of like taking this idea of learning for learning's sake and achievement and flipping it around and saying, what would our school district look like if kids were sort of case managed to find where they're strong and move them into more rigorous classes and see how they do along that line. And to me, the honors component is a critical piece of that path. And if we want to address the achievement gap, if we want heterogeneous grouping, having just those two zones and seeing it time and again, it'll just stretch and make that divide even greater for our kids. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. Did anyone else want to?
I'm Denise Nickel with, I'm very short.
I'm sorry, we have an attack microphone.
Is it gonna stay? Okay. I live on North 5th, across from the schools. I've had an excellent experience as a parent for my two sons, who one just went into college last year. The other is a sophomore. And my comments are really, there have been some excellent points tonight, particularly from the students and past students. I really appreciate what you've had to say. But my comments.
Could you speak into the microphone?
Is that better? My comments are just from my son's perspective, and I guess the first would be a question is, was the honors history class, were the students asked about this change?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
The honors history students, were they asked about the proposed change in class?
I was too busy looking for my mic. I can say it one more time. I'm having a hard time hearing.
The honors history students, have they been asked about the proposed change in their opinion?
I don't know that question. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not sure.
Well, I definitely recommend that that be done. We can postulate about what we think will happen and what their perspectives are, except for the two that were at the forum, we really don't know. My own son, he's one of those borderline students who is in honors, and it's wonderful that he has that opportunity, but he will be dropping, if you want to call it a drop, into the CP class. He's not going to be able to do the AP class. His experience has been in some CP classes and some honors classes. He describes the difference as depending on the numbers of students that are present in each. When he's one of a few honors type students in a class of many CP students, he gets bored. The level of the discussion is much simpler, slower, less materials covered by the end of the year. He sometimes will participate and sometimes not. When there are many more honors type students in the CP classes, then the students who are considered the CP students, his words are, become intimidated to speak out because the level of discussion moves up a bit. They're kind of overwhelmed by the kinds of comments that other students make. He also comments a lot about the disciplinary issues. There's a lot of kids who are, I don't know if it's discipline, it's not motivated. They don't do their homework. They don't come for tests. They don't come to class, which are different kinds of issues than you're trying to address here, I think. So those are some of the things he's reflected on. Also about the issue about differentiation. Both of my sons have had, are special needs students. Very intelligent, but quirky doesn't quite capture it. But they've had excellent education in the Highland Park District. My older son was accepted into every college he applied to, some of which were these elite colleges. And he's doing well, but that was a very difficult road to hoe. And he worked hard, the teachers worked hard. Some teachers are superb at differentiation, but that's not the majority. And it's very difficult to do. And for my second son now also has a special education plan. Many teachers do not follow it. Every year it's the same thing, year in and year out. Meet with each teacher, go over the plan, discuss the plan. Some teachers are wonderful at following it. Others cannot do it. We all have different strengths, right? To have an entire classroom with differentiated education would be very difficult to do for, I would think, for most instructors. And unless I missed it, it doesn't sound like the curriculum's even worked out yet for that class. I think you need to put more thought into it. And my son will probably suffer because of it. That's just my thing. So I just ask you to think more before you make this move.
Thank you very much. Did anyone else want to make any public comment?
The pen. So my name is Nikki Isaacson, and I live on Harper Street. And so, first of all, I just wanted to thank Dr. Taylor and the rest of the school board and the school system for being so responsive to the parents' concerns of our meeting last week. And I just wanted to actually shift the discussion just a little bit, and I wanted to ask, well, first of all, I also really appreciated the comments about cultural competency, and I wanted to know what, if any, kind of interventions are being made to try and assist those students, many of whom are minority students, to, again, encourage them to think differently about themselves and their own capabilities. So there are some there's some very interesting research out there about ways to kind of inoculate students against the effects of stereotype threat. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but if you're not, I would really encourage you to look into this. There are very brief 15-minute interventions that have shown significant increases in outcomes, academic achievement among minority students. So, and I'm sure there are other things. So I think there are things that can be done that can be very effective interventions, again, in helping students feel significantly more competent in their ability to achieve. I'm a therapist at Rutgers University. I can tell you I have counseled many students of color, who tell me horrific stories about being the only African American woman in a computer science class, and the professors and other students making it very clear that they don't feel she belongs there. And that's happening at the college level. And some of it is maybe unconscious, but it's not acceptable. So I just really want to encourage the school board and the staff to really think about what kinds of effective interventions that may be, essentially free, that can be done to help increase the achievement of all students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did anyone else want to make any public comment?
May I follow up on that while Kim goes up to the podium? I mean, I don't know anything about these brief interventions. They sound really interesting. Can we find out more about them? I mean, if those are out there, that seems like something great to follow up on. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Okay. Great, thanks.
And could you send us any information that you have?
Oh, yeah, that would be.
You can email me. That'll be helpful.
Thank you.
That would make things quicker. Thank you.
Whatever you do, it's not S. Taylor, it's Taylor at. That'll go to Sarah.
Hi, I'm Kim Hammond. I'm at 255 Harrison Avenue. I just wanted to echo some of the other comments that were made tonight, and I had also made similar comments at the forum last Tuesday. I would like to preface what I say by saying, in regards to first the honors class offering for History 2, it doesn't affect my kids, right? This is not something my daughter's already taken or has taken the A-push class, and my son is geared to sort of do that same thing. So I want you to understand that my comments are not about how I think this personally affects my own kids, but how it affects us as a school system. And I said this the other night that, and Ann brought it up again, that these 22 kids aren't just, it's just not a number. And when we saw it on that schedule on your presentation on Tuesday, it appeared as if maybe there was more of a scheduling problem. And I hear what the board has said tonight, especially what Darcy said about how our classes look and how there's this distinct white and Asian look versus brown and black look in our classrooms. I don't think there's a person in the room that doesn't want to find a solution to that problem. But when I hear how the approach to this solution, it doesn't compute on a basic level that we're going to take 3 levels and try to give more specialized education. And to do that, we're going to remove a level and leave only 2 levels left to do that. To tag on to the earlier part of our conversation about the 5 points, and someone else brought it up, the honors class is a weighted class as well. So it's not only, it would be nice to just say it was all about just the education and what our kids are leaving with, but there's this really ugly piece to it that, they have weighted GPAs, and that all factors into how they look when they leave high school or how appealing they are to the colleges that they're applying to. So I take it that everyone has given this a lot of consideration. It sounds like the teachers are really weighing very heavily on their opinion about, instead of keeping an honors and an AP, that it's more important to keep just the History 2 and the AP. It's just counterintuitive that we're not offering an honors class. Again, it's not, I don't think that honors class necessarily affects our highest learners. I think it's probably reaching out to a band of our middle, and that it would be a great place to find kids on the cusp and to push up to. And it may be that this history isn't the place where that can happen. So I guess my long-winded introduction is for the question, what other honors classes would we be offering? One of the reasons that I understood historically that 5-point bump was given to AP and honors classes was because Highland Park offers so few honors classes. And unfortunately, it is, as everyone has pointed out, a very competitive market getting into college, and that the more weighted classes these kids can take and be challenged by and learn from makes them more appealing, more eligible to get into good schools. So if the restructuring like this does take place in history for reasons that have been vetted and tested and checked over time, is there a plan though to give other AP and honors offerings? Some of the schools that you cited, like Metuchen or Monroe or whatever, are not Metuchen, but Monroe are very large schools, and their AP and honors offerings are quite vast, and we can't compete in that way. So I'm just curious what thought has been given to expanding honors offerings so that, aside from AP, there are ways for kids who are on that cusp to really be challenged and also get that benefit of their course weighting.
Do you have a response to that, Scott?
I don't. I mean, are you asking to go back to the question of what we will plan to do to differentiate instruction? Is that essentially? But if I were reading you correctly?
I want to know if we're removing honors classes in this strata, in this, in regards to history, because it doesn't seem to fit the solution that you've come up with for how to make that block of History 2 work. Are you going to be offering other honors classes? In other words, is there going to be, or AP classes in other areas to make up for this lack of a weighted class?
I was actually asked a question at the forum. Dr. Taylor, what's your vision for the future beyond this? And I said we have no plans next year to continue eliminating or adding courses. What happens down the road is open for research. I mean, I think we're going to have to figure out what kind of feedback we get from this approach. And if it was successful, maybe it is something we need to replicate in other areas. But right now, we don't have other plans to add additional honors classes or AP classes for that matter.
And when
I should back
when you're
up.
looking at course offerings then overall, are you looking at, compared to these other schools that you are holding us against, how many total AP or honors classes a kid could take going through the Highland Park school system compared to these other schools? And I will say again, and anyone who knows me knows this, I'm not a tiger mom. I am not chasing my kids around to take AP and honors classes. We are not the but I think we are a very diverse community, and we do have kids who want those challenges, and we also have kids in the middle who can meet those challenges, and if they can, they need those weighted classes to get into better schools.
It's something we can take a look at. We could take a look at. That's see the big picture and consider, when you look from grades 9 to 12, how many honors classes are we offering and how many AP classes we are offering. We've talked about expanding our AP offerings, whether it's virtually, if we don't have enough staff. But I also recognize that AP classes are more rigorous even than the honors program. And then I think what you're suggesting is, how about a one in, one out? If you're going to pull one in, maybe put one in,
it sounds
pull one
like
out,
your reason
put
is
one
that
in.
you want to do away with honors, but that you're trying to solve for this other problem. And I think that's been heard and that's appreciated. But we can't keep stripping down, course offerings. I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anybody's learned anything from this whole process that we've kind of gone through over the last few months, not only with this honors class, but with the +5 as well, is that we take feedback into account, and our goal is never to harm any of our students, whether they're the students at the high end or at the low end.
That is good to hear.
No, but I mean, I think it's important. I mean, because the feedback we got was, have you really thought about these sophomores and what that drop is going to look like? And if we can't answer that question, and we can't say we are going to guarantee that your student's not going to be hurt, then we'll change it.
Right.
So we're not looking to take things away from
Right.
kids. We're not looking to have our high achievers now all of a sudden not be able to get into the colleges that they want to get to. But these are the challenges we're faced in this incredibly diverse
So I just
town that we
wanted to-
have, that we all love. So we've all got to be able to figure out a way to get everything that all of our kids needs. And I'm glad Charisse brought up the point that, historically we've done this kind of tracking at Bartle. We're not doing it now. My kids are in 5th grade. They've gone through Bartle without that at all. So they have been different. Their instruction has been differentiated in those classrooms. We haven't had a swarm of, 4th and 5th grade parents coming to us now really upset that their kid's not getting what they need in math. So the hope would be that you take those lessons and you move those forward.
Right.
And then by the time those kids are going through middle school and into high school, the kids are more, they're all asking those questions. They're all engaged in their curriculum. They're all, they're all there to be present.
And I'm glad you went back to that, because that's precisely the point. And the difference between Bartle and the high school, because I appreciate what you're saying and what Charisse said about, and that's why I said, unfortunately, there's this ugly piece about, there's a difference in high school about, what a kid learns in the classroom, what they walk away with, and what it looks like they walked away with. And that's an ugly piece that we just have to deal with, whether we like it or not. And that has to do with offering enough AP or honors classes with these weighted GP, with the weighting, so that it's reflected in their GPA. So I don't think it changes the education that they get, but it changes how they're viewed in the world.
Right.
And unfortunately, as a system, we do have to think about that.
And for the
So thank you
weighting, one thing I
reminding me about
asked
that point.
Scott to look at, or for us to even maybe think about, because I hadn't thought about that weighting piece, that if we're taking out that, or not taking out, but if, we don't have that 3 level, and now that middle level in the middle isn't getting that, that weight, is there another way that even if we have those we have AP and then a more homogeneous second level, is there a way that there could still be a weight that a student could earn? Maybe the midterm and the final, like you're talking about how important those midterms and finals are. For those kids who really are looking to strive and to move up to the next level, maybe if you take the midterm and the final, you get that weight.
Or an
but if you don't
independent
care
pro-
about that weight,
or-
you don't take the midterm and the final, and you don't get the weight. So
Or an
maybe there's other
independent
ways to configure it so that you're not, again, we don't ever want to be taking away anything from anyone, but we do want to take those kids who we all know at times have been put into classes that are not rigorous and are not college prep. We want to do everything that we can to help move them up, but certainly not at the expense of anyone else.
you'll be happy to know I have relatively little to say. Most of it's been said already. I think that last point that was just made is really the crux of the issue here. There is a perception and there's reality, and the perception that many of us have, and some of us are vocal and some of us have not been, is that there's this effort to homogenize.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Can you just state your name and address for the record?
Celso Sanchez, North 8th Avenue, Highland Park, class of 86. There's this effort to homogenize and kind of mash everyone together in these classes, and I'm sure there's fantastic research out there that validates this. I would love it if you would share it with us to give us a more convincing argument, because quite frankly, I'm sure like any parent in any town, you don't want your kid to be the guinea pig, right? That's one of the issues, and I think Kim's point, it kind of puts it best. When you're sophomore, junior, or senior in high school and you're trying to get into a college, whatever college level is appropriate for you, that's probably not the best time to have 21st century learning that's experimental, if that's the case, and I don't know if that's the case. If it's well documented, I'd love to see more about this Montclair example, knew nothing about it, but that's the kind of thing that makes me convinced, right? That's how I would like to think we make arguments, positive and negative, and have discourse with information and examples, rather than just saying, as a perception, whether it was reality or not, that many of us had, that, hey, we're going to give this a go and see what happens. And 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, for me, is not the time to do that. If the kids want to do an independent study and give it a go, or they want to travel abroad and give it a go, as we do encourage them to do in some families, great. But to take a structure and kind of drip, 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 start undoing things. And quite frankly, the word stripping away, it's hard to look at it as anything else, really. And I don't have to reiterate what Kim said, but I hope you all agree. How could anyone with a conscience want to push anyone down? We're trying to pull everyone up, right? That's the point. But all I hear about the discussion is, well, you know, if these guys aren't ambitious enough, guys and girls aren't ambitious enough to try AP, then, you know, too bad. And for the CP folks, whatever you want to call it, the reality is, what I'd love to hear more about is where's the infrastructure in place to kind of encourage these kids to take harder classes? Where's the discussion with those families that might not have English as the first language? And maybe that happens already, but I'm not hearing that as part of the discussion. All I'm hearing is, as you said, unfortunately, college is not really the priority. It's a much broader thing than that. That might be so, but for many of us, it is one of the more important priorities, particularly at this stage of the game. So the reality is that is how a lot of us look at it. And quite frankly, the brag sheets that all these schools use, and I've done more research than I should have done and wanted to do over the last couple of weeks, all these school profiles, you know what they look like. You highlighted them. They're not telling you kid satisfaction. They're telling you what their SAT scores and what their GPAs are. So I think that's something that has to be part of the discourse. And it's not an ugly truth to me at all. It's truth. It's the reality. Let's make sure that's a consistent part of the discourse, not an apologetic one. And that's the concern that I have. You know, we did have tracking. We did have, as I've said before, the 3 levels and so on and so forth. And I understand there's a philosophical debate as to whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But on the other hand, if someone's not as ambitious, and Lillian made some of the best, you know, she should be here forever. Her arguments are fantastic, fantastically well thought out. She's got information that none of us have because she lives this stuff daily.
That's why we have students here. It's very important to have them here at the
particularly an
table.
articulate one like that, who had a very good...
Michelle and Lillian have both been very helpful throughout these conversations.
So you know, we're all for, I mean, education, that's why we're here, right? It's not just for our kid. Quite frankly, this doesn't affect my kids as directly as it might have affected some of these, you know, folks who are all about getting the 15 AP classes and the ones that remain in the high school. And that's their choice, and that's right for them, and that's fine. But what I have been up here doing is making sure that we're addressing the opportunities for everyone, not just the ones that were most, it seems like most of the discussion concerns the CP stuff. And our side of the discussion seems inadvertently to discuss so much of the AP stuff. And it's not really about just that. It's about making sure that this discussion kind of embraces all of that. And quite frankly, it has not convinced people. That's why you have us, you know, you had the meeting on Tuesday, you have this, you've had previous meetings, and I suspect you're going to have more, because even now, until you said that, Darcy, a couple of minutes ago, it sounded to me like this is going to be like, well, the beginning of a trend towards getting rid of the honors classes. Which, by the way, it kind of reads that way in the strategic plan that's on the website, where it says we're going to look at possibly, I don't have the verbiage, I have it in my folder, but we'll look at getting rid of honors class as an and you should be able to consider everything. Everything should be on the table.
Well, and as Scott said, there's no hard and fast plan to do anything on any kind of timetable. And I so much appreciated Jay's comments about, like really looking at all these pieces.
Rigorous
And
measurement,
I mean, the
absolutely.
reason that we're having, all these discussions about this is so that we do get that input.
Yeah.
But we do have to move forward mindfully with all of those levels of students in mind. And as you can see, there's not a lot of parents here advocating.
No, and that's part of the problem. And I
for-
wonder,
exactly.
is there a program in place to engage them more effectively? I think you spoke before about the students of color or something. There was some outreach program. I'd love to know more about that. I don't know if it's something I should already know, but I'd love to know more about that, because if that's part of the problem, and you guys described the courses, right? The CP has this complexion and these have this complexion, then I'd love to know as a parent and as a concerned citizen, what are we doing?
Right. And I mean, I guess the piece, I'm sorry, go ahead, Charisse.
I'm sorry. I mean, I think the one thing that we want to be really careful about is seeding the problem with students of color, and about saying that students of color somehow have put themselves in the situation where they are in CP. And we have to look at how our system perpetuates the continuation of those students being in CP year after year after year, probably since you were here in '86. And it's probably been the same 10 years before that. Well, no, not 10, because we only integrated in '78. So, when we are
Highland Park
going to
only
talk
integrated in
about-
'78? What?
Yeah, Highland Park High School only integrated in 1978 by court order. By court order. That's a whole history, and we're coming up on our 40th anniversary, and I hope we celebrate it in style with really great integration of the schools.
Can you define integration for me?
I'm sorry?
Can you define integration for me?
The schools in Highland Park used to be segregated by race. Basically, folks who lived in the Triangle in the Upper South Side all went to what is now Irving School, and you had...
I went to Irving School.
Okay, so you
And
were
I lived
in...
in the Montgomery apartments.
Well, I don't know. That was later, though. That
Anyway,
was not,
sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
that
I
was-
don't want to distract from your point.
That was
Go ahead.
also later.
Go ahead.
But
What's
that
the broader
was when
point?
each
What's
of
the
the
broader
schools was its own entity in terms of its neighborhood.
Mhm.
And those schools were not integrated until 1978.
Right.
And there was a big fight in Highland Park at that
Mhm.
time. Great news articles. You really should look them up. Fantastic read. I love history. I love local history. I'm really into it. But I think we want to be really careful about assuming that CP is where it is because students have self-selected into it.
Are you under the impression that somebody assumes that? I haven't heard that comment made.
Well, part of the language that we have been using has been seeding the problem. Well, has anyone talked with their parents? Has anyone gone to those students to do X, Y, and Z?
Mhm.
And it's not that I don't think that we shouldn't do, it's not that I think we should not do outreach.
Mhm.
But I think we also need to look at how maintaining our system in exactly the shape that it's in right now prevents us from changing that dynamic over time. And I don't want to change that dynamic at the expense of students who are in the honors classes. That's not my intention. That's not Dr. Taylor's intention. That's not the history teacher's intention, is to shift it negatively. As I have said, I work in a university setting. I work both in terms of recruitment as well as in terms of working with first-year students. I understand exactly what criteria are looked at in terms of students coming into college. So, I understand exactly the argument that parents are making, the concerns that parents have about what kind of changes this would make for their students' profile in comparison with other schools. I also know our community is really committed to having a dynamic and wonderful, warm environment for every single person that is here.
Which is why most of us are here, yeah.
Exactly,
Mhm.
which is why we've chosen this town.
Mhm.
So, this isn't a settled thing, I don't think. This is an ongoing conversation, and we really appreciate everybody coming out and talking about it, because I think we need to have more dialogue around the issue of our curriculum. But understand that there are students who got slotted into CP freshman year or in middle school who wanted to go to college.
Without a doubt,
And who,
that's an issue that was
because
here
they
when I
got
was here.
slotted into CP in middle school or high school, they did not have the opportunity to prepare for college. So by the time they got to junior year and even had the choice of whether to take US history, CP, or honors,
So our
They
CP classes basically prevent people from getting into college? Is that what you're saying? I'm not sure I hear that right.
no, what I am saying is that
Because we're saying we didn't have an opportunity.
The demotivational process
Okay,
of consistently being slotted
okay.
into CP
Mhm.
has the effect of discouraging students from wanting to try because you feel defeated. You feel, why should you bother trying, because you only end up in CP all over again. And if we have 3 levels, which we do now,
Yeah, that would seem to argue
there's
for honors,
always
but,
going
yeah.
to need to be people slotted in CP. Even if they want to go to college, they need to have CP. So if you only have X number of seats in CP, and X number of seats in honors, and X number of seats in AP, somebody's got to fill those seats.
But is the objective then to
Right.
not have a CP at all? Because even though if it's appropriate for some students, I don't understand.
That's not for me to decide.
All
That
right.
would be, that's a issue for the administrators and the teachers together with the curriculum coordinators to determine what the best curriculum is for the schools. What I'm trying to say is that I really want our community to think, and it's an ethical dilemma, because we all want what is best for our kids,
Collectively,
collectively.
right.
We all want what is best for our kids. So how do we set up a system that doesn't disadvantage some for the advantage of others? So that's what's so difficult here, is that we don't want to disadvantage the kids in honors, but we also don't want to disadvantage the kids in CP either. And the kids in AP they're already going, you know. The
So
kids
they're
that are
so they're
doing the-
advantaged because they're in
doing the
AP?
4, they're doing the 5 APs.
Mhm.
They're, if they decided they wanted to take one general course because they were already taking AP Bio, AP Chem, AP English, whatever they had on their schedule for that year, taking one general US History 2 course alongside that isn't going to have any detrimental effect on their application to college.
No, I would agree. I think the comment or the discussion about going further and further is, I think, the concern. So anyway, we hope the experiment works.
Yeah, and
Thank
I
you.
think it's important also to look at all the different pieces that we have in place. We talked about the stuff with the kids younger now moving up, so that the kids are in less stratified learning environments as they're moving up through our system already. We're putting in much different like restorative practices in the middle school and into the high school. So we're doing less stratifying our students by singling out certain students for harsh discipline or removing them from the classroom, or lots of in-school, out-of-school suspension kind of stuff, trying to deal with discipline to keep students in the school environment, keep them engaged, keep them motivated. So this isn't, I feel like, I'm afraid, I don't want us to look at this as just kind of one tiny piece. There are lots of moving parts that are all intended to work together so that all of our students feel more, what's the right word?
To relate to it? They learn how to learn from each other. You know, my daughters have talked about the track that they're in, and they're in 2 different tracks. And they talk about the same kinds of kids they're constantly going to school with. And I find that for me as a parent, this would be a wonderful way for them to socialize. Maybe that's one thing you're trying to aim at. Socialize with kids from different walks of life, which they don't have the opportunity to do if they get stuck in a particular track. It's very hard to get out of. So I don't think that's what you meant to say, but you got me thinking along those lines.
Something along those lines.
Thanks.
It's getting late. Thanks, also. Did anyone else want to make public comment?
Hi, I'm Tanya Tulloch. I live at 401 Lincoln Avenue. I just wanted to make sure, or have the board clarify for me that this isn't a done deal, because I had a sophomore go to schedule today, and the honors 2 was not an option. So, I mean, I'm not affected by this so much because my son is taking a push. But if you have 120 sophomores that are going through scheduling right now and they're not being given this U.S. History 2 honors course, like, is there going to be, are the kids that could go to the honors course, are they choosing, did they inadvertently choose the CP option and because they didn't want the AP option? I think this needs to be really thought out because that's what my son told me today when he went to schedule. So, and we're hearing it from additional sophomores too. So if it's not a done deal, then why are the counselors telling these kids that it's not an option?
I'll look into that. That is an issue. Regardless, once a decision is made by this board Monday night, we'll make sure that students' schedules are adjusted accordingly. If it means that, in fact, the board has resolved to eliminate the honors course, then we'll continue with the path in your case that we have. If not, obviously the counselors are going to have to meet with the students again, go back to the options.
Yeah, it just needs clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me know that.
Okay, if there isn't any further public comment, then we will move on to the rest of our agenda, which is pretty short for the evening, the rest of the evening. I don't have too many things for my president's report. I did just want to update everyone on the commissioner's decision that was released on, gosh, what day was that now? I'm losing track of days. It was some day last week. We've been waiting to hear on the decision on charter school expansions and Hatikva, which is in East Brunswick, but draws students here from Highland Park. I think, we have like 24, 23, somewhere around there this year, which cost the district upwards of $300,000. And we've held steady for the last couple of years.
400,000.
But that's with the other ones attached. I just meant Hatikva. I just meant Hatikva specifically. Yeah. So the commissioner did grant an expansion to Hatikva, which, although I looked at it more closely over the weekend, there's something kind of strange about how it was done. Hatikva started out as a K-5 school, and then a couple years ago asked to expand to be a K-8 school, got that expansion, so they added the 6, 7, and 8. This time asked for 25 additional students per grade, and they were granted that, but only in kindergarten and first grade. So they'll get 25 additional kindergartners next year, and then the year after that, 25 additional kindergartners and first graders. But then the enrollment doesn't span the rest of their K-8 classes, so it's very strange. It's kind of like this commissioner has made a decision where then the next administration, when Hatikva comes up for renewal, is going to have to say, well, I mean, maybe the next administration is going to have a completely different take on charter schools to this, and then they're going to have to decide if they're going to continue that expansion or whether they're going to say you're done. So it's setting, and it seems to be this way for multiple charter schools around the state. So it's a very strange scenario that the Christie administration has set up here.
So what you're saying is the lower grades are getting expanded, but not the upper grades?
The way the expansion is spelled out right now, yeah, they were only granted an additional 25 kids in kindergarten and first grade, and that's it. That's all they were granted. So we could see a slight uptick next year in our numbers because of those 25 kindergarten slots that are opened up. Hatikva has been very clear in all of their applications that they have very little interest left in East Brunswick. And now the students aren't coming from East Brunswick, they're coming from Highland Park, they're coming from Medicine, they're coming from South River, they're coming from 25 districts in 7 counties. So it's really like a roll of the dice as to what districts those students are going to come from. It's a very strange scenario. And then Central Jersey College Prep was also granted an expansion, not only an expansion of their existing facility in Franklin, but also an additional satellite campus in New Brunswick. So potentially starting in September of 2018, not 2017, but 2018, a year and a half out, there could be 2 additional charter schools in New Brunswick, which that could also impact us as well. Central Jersey College Prep has already started sending direct mailers to the homes of families in Highland Park, including one of our board members. So if these charter schools are allowed to continue to aggressively advertise to districts like Highland Park, this is going to become an increasing problem. But as I said, it's going to be very interesting to see. We have a brand new administration next year. Who knows who that's going to be? But you know, 2 of the Democratic candidates have certainly said they support a moratorium on charter school seats. They're not going to, you know, Wisniewski said he would write an executive order when he took office to, you know, to put in a charter moratorium. So who knows? It's hard to say what's going to go on. We know we did get a slight increase in our charter school tuitions for next year based on the budget numbers that we were given on Thursday. So I think it was like an additional $25,000 or so over last year. So the numbers are kind of slowly creeping up, and we were actually sitting in our budget meeting when we got, in a finance committee meeting, looking at the budget when we got the numbers. So, I mean, we quite literally had to be like, okay, here's $25,000 there. Where do we take that $25,000 here?
We had to find the 25,000.
Right, you have to keep trying to cut it from these little teeny tiny places to do our best not to impact instruction, not to lose staff, not to, but it's becoming increasingly hard with continued flat state aid for the last 5 years, you know, after massive cuts for 3 years when some people in the audience had to find that money with those massive cuts. It becomes harder and harder. We're still significantly under, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but we're significantly under our state aid figures from 2009, which is kind of like staggering when you think about it, like that 7 years later, we have less money from the state than we had in 2009. So that's going to continue to be a pinch. But the commissioner approved 22 expansions throughout the state. All told, it's like 6,300 additional charter school seats that are going to be opened up over the next couple of years. So there are a lot of angry districts across the state, a lot. So one thing I wanted to ask the board is, I've been asked if we would like to kind of co-sponsor an event on this topic that's being planned in Princeton because an expansion. And one of the things Scott and I have had conversations about over the last year or so, which is absolutely true, like one of the things that we can do to keep our students here and keep the dollars here is to keep our program as strong as possible, and that will help encourage people not to leave and go out to charter schools. But then there's Princeton Charter School, you know. So, you know, Princeton, there is a charter school within Princeton. They're losing a couple $1 million already to that charter school, and now that charter school was just granted an expansion as well. So it's hard to make the argument that, you know, Princeton doesn't have, you know, a strong enough program to keep their, you know, students in district. Some folks are just going to, if there's a choice, they're going to take that choice for whatever reason. So anyway, they are planning a forum where we would invite districts from around the state to come discuss those issues. We'd invite actually the gubernatorial candidates, as many of the gubernatorial candidates that would attend as possible, so we could get them there in the room. They could hear what the concerns are, and they could talk to the folks assembled about what their plans would be. We'd be able to seat probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 450, 500 folks, so we're hoping it would be a pretty good-sized event. So would there be interest?
When would that be?
Looking at late March, early April, I think. I don't think
That's
it dates.
soon.
Yeah. Oh, we have to do it quickly because really one of the tricks here is going to be to see if there's anything we can do to get some sort of, like, not to throw out, you know, silly terms, but if there's some sort of injunctive relief we could figure out where we can not. Once this is kind of the conundrum. I'm never a proponent for closing a kid's school or for, if a kid is out of school, for yanking that kid out of that school. If they start filling those seats in kindergarten, I'm the last person who's going to advocate that those kids should come out of those seats. Do you know what I mean? So my preference would be to freeze these expansions if we could statewide.
Let's do this then.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
you know, and I think the good thing about pulling all these people together is there's a lot of smart people that have been doing this work over the last few years, but they're all kind of scattered. And there's a pocket of people in Princeton, there's a pocket of people in Hoboken, there's a pocket of people here, and the idea is to bring all those people together in one room with the candidates and say, hey, help us figure this out, because the Christie administration is leaving us in a real pickle, and they're leaving you in a real pickle, and let's figure out what we can do here.
Pickle's a nice way to say it.
So if the board is amenable, then I'll start working with folks to put that together with the board as a co-sponsor. Okay, because the idea is to have board sponsor it as opposed to advocacy groups, or, you know, to get the.
Yeah, it should have been done. It should have.
Right.
It should have been
as long
done.
as it doesn't cost us any money.
It is not going to cost us a dime. Princeton is going to host it, so it'll be at their high school. They have a nice auditorium where they can host the event. Okay.
Yep.
So that's all I have for my president's report. Does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up under old business? News? Anybody? Oh, Sharice, you want to bring up your thing under new business? Because we didn't, and just so you guys know, we didn't put all the liaison committee reports on the agenda because the way the calendar fell, we have 3 meetings in a row, which is kind of, I know you're all shaking your head like, who planned this? So we're going to have another meeting next week. It just seems silly to do it last week, this week, and next week. So we'll do the liaison committee reports at the next meeting. That'll give us all time to actually meet.
That would be great.
So, Sharice, I know you had a flyer that you wanted to talk about, so could you do that now for new business?
Sure. So, the Highland Park Parents of Students of Color and the Live Mentorship Program are co-sponsoring an event. It's author reading and talk with Patrick Phillips, who is the author of Blood at the Root, Racial Cleansing in America. That's going to be going on March 16th at 7 p.m. Down at the Senior Youth Recreation Center, 220 South 6th Avenue. And the author is actually doing this completely free of charge, which was really amazing. It was put together by Monique Coleman.
Yay, Monique.
HP parent.
Thank you, Monique.
Yay, Monique. And so it's open to the public, free of charge, and since he's not charging us, we're not charging anybody else.
That's great. Okay, thank you, Sharice. Did anybody else have anything? I can't wait till next week when I see you all again. No? Okay. So that'll bring us to another public comment. The Highland Park Board of Education welcomes public participation. Is reserved this time for your comments. So if anybody else has any comment they'd like to make. No? Okay. So seeing none, we will adjourn. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.